Welcome back. Tonight, we'll wander into the hushed world of mountains, those towering shapes that have watched over us for centuries, older than the cities we live in, older even than the stories we tell. At first glance, mountains may seem fully known, tamed by maps, satellites, and climbers who have reached their snowy peaks. But hidden within their folds, beneath the mist that clings to their slopes, and the shadows that veil their valleys, lie places that remain untouched, unexplored, and in many ways forgotten. Some mountains conceal forests so dense that sunlight barely touches the ground. Others cradle caves so deep that no human has yet walked their full length. There are cliffs that rise sheer into the clouds, waterfalls that thunder in secret ravines, and ecosystems where plants and animals have evolved in isolation, unseen by the wider world. For as much as we think we know, mountains still hold mystery's natural fortresses that protect worlds within worlds. In this documentary, we'll travel slowly through these hidden landscapes. We'll explore why some mountains remain beyond our reach, why even today with technology at our fingertips, there are valleys no one has crossed, caves no one has mapped, and ridges no one has climbed. We'll step into the realm of myth and legend, where unexplored peaks gave rise to tales of monsters and spirits. And we'll consider how science continues to uncover secrets in places once thought unreachable. So settle in, let your thoughts drift like mist rolling over a ridge, and allow the quiet mystery of the mountains to carry you through the night. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? You stand at the edge of a high meadow just before dawn, the sky a pale promise of light, and breathe in the crisp mountain air. Behind you rise peaks, whose summits are etched into every map, each named, each conquered by climbers who left little flags and fleeting footprints in the snow. Yet beyond those familiar ridges lie hidden worlds, a labyrinth of unseen valleys, secret plateaus, and remote couloirs veiled in shadow. Here, the illusion of conquered peaks dissolves in mist and mystery, for summits alone cannot claim a mountain's untold depths. As the first rays of sun slip over granite blades, the dew-drenched grass shivers in gold, and your senses awaken to a landscape far more vast than the distant campsites you passed. You recall photographs of mountaintops wrapped in prayer flags and gleaming ice axes driven into seracs. Those images fill guidebooks and websites, and yet they frame only a fraction of what lies beyond the ridges. Hidden gorges shaped by millennia of glacial carving secret springs, tucked beneath overhanging cliffs and forests of twisted pines clinging to sheer escarpments. In the decades since everyone needed a photo atop Everest or Kilimanjaro, adventurers have pressed onward to the far corners of the map. Yet even as satellites trace every crag and fissure from space, and drones sweep ridgelines with high-definition cameras, vast swaths of mountain terrain remain off-limits. They are hidden by geography-sheer walls that defy rope and pick, and by climate summit winds that howl like banshees, rivers that swell to torrents in spring thaw, and snows that bury tracks the moment they are made. Below the sunlit ridge where most trekkers pause, a sheltered amphitheater of crags holds a valley so remote that no surveyor has measured its floor. In its bowl, the air carries the scent of wet granite and pine sap, and quiet dominates even the roar of distant rivers. A wanderer stepping into this bowl might feel the hush of centuries, the knowledge that every echo once belonged to wolves rather than to human voices. This is a world untouched by base camps and Sherpa trails, a place where the mountain still stands unconquered. Climbing guides speak of acclimatization, oxygen cylinders, and high camps as if they complete the conversation. But there is a second dialect spoken by river runners, cave explorers, and ecologists, the hidden dialect of mountain interiors. It names marmot burrows that honeycomb slopes, of alpine meadows that bloom for weeks under perfect warmth, of roaming herds of ibex and snow leopards that vanish behind rock ledges. These details rarely reach summit narratives, yet they shape the pulse of these secret lands. You recall the story of a lone botanist who trekked into a valley on the leeward side of a Himalayan ridge, seeking alpine orchids thought extinct above 5,000 meters. His ascent across glacial moraines revealed a hidden plateau blanketed in flowers, an ecosystem isolated for millennia. Scientists would later discover new insect species feeding on mosses. Yet no climber passed through this shallow gorge. They all chose the steep spur leading to the col, ignoring the gentler slopes that invited life. Mountains are not merely peaks. They are intertwined webs of water, stone, and wind. Ridges draw clouds into sudden storms, while lee slopes hold sheltered niches where moisture pools. Narrow canyons channel warm air, melting snow in spring to feed streams deep below. Crevasses open to swallow whole sections of a glacier, preserving pale ice as deep as tree rings in a cork. In these hidden spaces, the mountain retains memories no summit logbook ever records. As you inhale the first light, imagine the plateau just above the tree line, cloaked in fog at dawn. Here, ancient junipers twist into bulbous shapes, their roots clinging around glacial erratics. Moss carpets cling even on near-vertical faces, nourished by humidity, wafting from a spring concealed behind boulders. Below that, a forest of dwarf willows hides marmot warrens, each tunnel system marking a network of underground passages as intricate as any human-built labyrinth. Mountains challenge us to think in 3 dimensions: peaks, valleys, and hidden corridors beneath. Today's hikers race to sit on a summit bench and sign a guestbook scribbled with names. Yet just beyond the known trail, a hidden cirque shelters frost-heaved granite and pools where salamanders brood in ice-cold water. A microclimate here defies altitude norms, supporting flora that nowhere else on the range can survive. This is a secret garden held in shadow, known only to a few. The illusion of conquered peaks rests on human ambition, our need to plant a flag, leave a name, and record a time. But mountains care little for human measurements. They shift with tectonic urges, crack with freeze-thaw cycles, and bury our paths under avalanches that rewrite landscapes overnight. An unclimbed summit may feel sublime, but a hidden valley can vanish in a landslide before we even discover its existence. Political boundaries often cloak mountain interiors in coats of red tape. Border zones in Asia and South America remain closed to civilians, their ridges patrolled by armies. Access roads end at dusty outposts. Trails vanish into minefields or protected reserves. In these zones, mountains swell with stories untold, ancient shrines lost in undergrowth, petroglyphs on hidden spires, and burial sites perched above nameless passes. Even climbers who summit nearby peaks never glimpse these off-grid treasures. Then there are the pure logistical barriers. Endless days of travel on foot or yak, no radio signals, no supply drops. Mule trains shearing across scree slopes that slope endlessly into obscurity. Helicopters hover above popular ridges, but cannot land on hidden benches perched between towering walls. To reach these secret places takes months of careful planning, enough time for snow to settle, creepers to weave over your tracks, and funding to dwindle before you depart. Climate change adds a new urgency. Glaciers retreat along well-known icefalls, but even more rapid melt happens in sheltered cirques. Ice caves collapse without warning, and permafrost thaws beneath rock glaciers, unleashing landslides that erase entire plateaus. Scientists documenting these changes in remote valleys find species losing habitat in real time. Each retreat reveals new sediments, but also erases fragile moss colonies, alpine flowers, and bacterial mats that evolved over centuries. In the afternoons, winds off the plateau stir dust into the air, and stenched eddies carry campfire smoke from distant shepherd encampments. Yet beneath the wind, the hidden valleys remain silent. A shepherd's yurt may percolate tea, his dogs snuffle at marmot holes, but the valley floor sees no guides or mountaineers. They traverse obvious saddles and calls, passing by these side valleys like travelers who follow main roads and never stray into back streets. Mapmakers sketch contour lines in neat ovals, but they cannot capture the nuance of hidden spurs and subplateaus. Satellite maps show green slopes dotted with trees, but resolution blurs ancient terraces cut by monks or farmers a millennium ago. Archaeologists speculate on trade routes that once crossed high passes, carrying salt and saffron, yet the tracks have dissolved under centuries of winter slash. We see only summits and main passes, not the network of byways where traders slept in snowbound monsoon. Every expedition that ventures into such hidden realms feels like a true crossing of a frontier. Backpackers follow carved trails. Alpinists ascend iron rungs and fixed ropes. But cavers probe ice tunnels behind seracs. Botanists cross boulder fields for delicately perched herbs. Geologists map folds in hidden synclines that record eons of mountain uplift. These specialists glimpse countercurrents to the mainstream ascent narrative, a shadow counterpoint to every summit story. Ancient peoples also knew these secrets. Oral traditions speak of sacred glens where gods met in clouds, of hidden tarns or shamans bathed in cold water. Petroglyphs on boulders hint at forgotten rituals figures carved into granite ledges overlooking cliffs. Pilgrims once braved steep ravines to reach shrines perched where eagles nest. Those paths are now overgrown, hidden by vegetation or washed away by torrents, yet their ghosts linger in local folklore. In the hush of dusk, you may stand at a familiar peak and watch the sun slip behind ridge after ridge. Light pools in main valleys, then fades into twilight. But below, in the shadow-side valleys, darkness arrives sooner, and life adapts its rhythms accordingly. Owls shrink into crevices. Marmots settle in their dens. Bats flit from hidden caves. In these valleys, time moves differently. Days shorten, nights deepen, and weather shifts can trap you in a snowstorm without any familiar trail to guide you back. To truly know a mountain, you must descend its least trodden gorges and circle its back faces. You must feel stones under your hands that have spilled from rockfalls, no human witnessed. Listen to water that has formed canyons beyond the maps, and gaze up at peaks you thought you knew, but now see from an angle that transforms their shapes. In that exploration, you glimpse the mountain's true soul, a living entity with hidden chambers and secret passages. Mountains teach humility through their hidden worlds. Summits are finite points marked by flags. Valleys unfold in endless complexity. Even the most intrepid climber finds that reaching a summit is a blink compared to the slow centuries of geological sculpting beneath. Each hidden saddle reveals new details. The lichen's subtle patterns on rock faces, the microclimate where mosses carpet cracks, and the thrumming presence of unseen aquifers carving canyons underfoot. As you wander back toward the known trail, twilight pooling in the call beneath you, remember dawn at the meadow's edge, how the first light unveiled distant summits yet left hidden valleys in shadow. In every mountain range, human ambition chases peaks, but nature reserves vast interiors untouched. The illusion that summits mean mastery dissolves the moment you glimpse a hidden valley no satellite can map, no summit photo can capture. So let your mind wander beyond the obvious tracks. In sleep, imagine yourself slipping through hidden couloirs, following secret waterways fed by melting snow, and pausing on a mossy slab far below the ridgeline. There, silence envelops you, and the mountain's untold stories whisper in the hush. For the greatest adventures lie not at the highest points, but in the uncharted spaces that remain hidden behind ridges and valleys, worlds we may never fully uncover, yet whose mystery calls us onward. You step off the narrow ridge into a hush that feels as old as the earth itself. Below you yawns a valley so deep and steep-sided that sunlight tucks itself away before it reaches the floor. Mist gathers in the chasm, coalescing into drifting rivers of cloud that curl around sheer cliffs. In this hidden realm, time moves differently. Wind whistles through rocky amphitheaters, water seeps from secret springs, and forests cling to crags no mapmaker has charted. Welcome to the valleys lost to time, where natural walls keep ecosystems sheltered and largely unknown to outsiders. The walls rise on either side like ancient ramparts. Granite towers catch the first rays of dawn, glowing pink and gold before shadows swallow them again. You listen to the distant drip of meltwater, each drop a note in a cavernous symphony. A trail of rhododendron and heather clings to ledges, blossoms nodding in the cool air. Even in summer's warmth, a valley floor can lie in shade, lulled into slow rhythms of growth and decay. Here, mosses carpet stones, lichens stain boulders in emerald and ochre, and wildflowers open their petals only for weeks at a time. No path leads you deep inside. The few trails that reach the rim vanish under talus and broken rock. From above, you gaze down at a thin ribbon of mist, marking a hidden river, the only hint of life below. That river has carved this gorge over millennia, gnawing at bedrock through ice ages and monsoon seasons. It rushes until it finds a casual exit, then disappears into karst caves and subterranean channels. It is a waterway without tourists, without waymarkers, moving unseen until it emerges in springs that feed distant villages. In the heart of such a valley, microclimates flourish. South-facing walls bake under midday sun, cracking in heat while ferns and liverworts hide in crevices where shade gathers. North-facing hollows trap snow through spring, feeding little cascades that tumble over ledges. These drips pool into tarns ringed by dwarf willows and alpine grasses. In late afternoon, dragonflies skim the water's surface, their iridescent wings flashing in fleeting shafts of light. For a moment, the valley floor brightens like a hidden stage before darkness returns. Because human footprints are few, wildlife moves in silence. You might glimpse the flash of a snow leopard's tail as it pads along a ledge high above the forest line, or hear the rasp of a pheasant's wings as it darts into undergrowth. Musk deer slip through thickets, their scent drifting like wood smoke. Pikas cluster on rock piles, shrilling in dawn's chill as they gather grasses for winter stores. Each call, each rustle, belongs to a world that thrives without roads or campsites. Botanists prize these valleys for the plant communities they shelter. Rare orchids bloom in moist pockets, their delicate petals hidden beneath fallen logs. Edelweiss and saxifrages cling to cliff faces, surviving on nothing more than mist and grit. In spring, ephemeral blooms carpet scree slopes, painting the barren hillside in lavender and white. Seeds carried on wind and animal fur drift into these remote hollows, establishing populations isolated from the genetic currents of surrounding ridges. Over centuries, new subspecies emerge flowers that cannot be found anywhere else. The geology of these lost valleys tells a story older than human memory. Strata of limestone and shale tilt at dizzying angles, then vanish under layers of granite pushed upward by tectonic forces. Glacial polish and striations mark ancient ice flows that ground through bedrock during the last glacial maximum. Moraines dam back meltwater, creating ribbon lakes that mirror the sky. Some valleys bear the scars of past rock slides, enormous slabs that tumbled en masse and filled troughs with broken stone. These scars heal slowly under moss and lichen, but the memory of collapse lingers in boulder fields and steep slopes. Few explorers have ventured far enough to map these interiors. Early surveyors measured only main passes and watershed divides. Jeweled tapestries of color in hidden meadows escaped the theodolites, and the song of the valley's resident thrush remained unheard in distant city halls. Satellite imagery can hint at vegetation patterns or shadowed hollows, but it cannot convey the hush of windless air, nor the sparkle of dew on a spiderweb suspended between two ferns. The valley's secrets refuse to pass through a lens alone. Local shepherds know narrow corridors where their flocks graze and summer-hardy goats picking around boulders. bell collars jingling like wind chimes. They follow stock trails carved in mineral dust, pausing at high pastures watered by hidden springs. They speak of whispering stones, where the echo returns, broken by hidden caves. They point to hollows they will never enter, where elders say spirits dwell in ancient ruins half swallowed by moss. Their stories offer clues, but even they admit the interior remains unknowable. Biologists who venture here speak of endemism species found only within the valley's walls. Stream-dwelling salamanders with translucent skin inhabit cold, oxygen-rich pools. Crustaceans scuttle through cavern lakes, blind and pallid, relics of when the valley lay beneath an ancient sea. On rocky cirques, mycologists find fungi whose spores hitchhike on winds from distant continents. Each valley becomes a biogeographic island, cut off by cliffs and gorges, a laboratory of evolution in miniature. In winter, even hardened souls yield to the valley's power. Snow piles up in shaded basins, awaiting a thaw that may arrive weeks or months later. Avalanche chutes carve clean paths through forests, resetting ecosystems in sudden violence. Survival here demands adaptation. Animals burrow deep, seeds lie dormant under ice, and roots stretch for water in frozen soils. When spring arrives, ecosystems erupt in green-like fireworks of life ignited after long hibernation. The seasons shape hidden valleys more dramatically than open slopes. Spring floods carve new channels. Summer heat darkens crags. Autumn frosts spike grasses with silver. Winter storms hammer walls into new debris fields. Each season brings a new facade, and yet humans glimpse only fragments when they cross the ridges. By the time travelers visit for a single week, the valley may have changed coats, from wildflower tapestry to rock pond mosaic to snow-white serenity. Remote valleys offer refuge for species pushed off lower slopes by grazing, logging, or road building. Brown bears retreat to sheltered gorges, establishing dens in forested recesses. Wildcats and lynxes range along cliff footings, hunting rodents flushed from tailless cracks. Invasive plants cannot cling to vertical rock walls, so native flora survives undiluted by foreign competition. These valleys become strongholds of biodiversity, long lost in the world below. Human impacts occasionally seep into these sanctuaries. Microplastics ride falling snow. Pollutants carried on air currents settle in sediment layers. Climate change thaws permafrost and alters hydrology. But the walls still buffer extremes. Chemical traces dilute in fast currents, and deep springs shield against temperature swings. Protecting these sanctuaries requires more than fence lines. It demands respect for borders drawn by stone and ice, boundaries that nature herself has established. Conservationists argue that mapping alone cannot save these valleys. You must engage local communities, honor indigenous place names, and develop low-impact research methods. Remote sensing can identify zones of high endemism, but scientists must trek through thorny thickets and cross logjams of boulder fields to catalog a single new species. Each excursion becomes an act of devotion, a vow to learn without leaving permanent scars. In folklore, lost valleys are doorways to other realms. Shamans speak of hidden valleys where time flows differently, where healers gather rare herbs under moonlight, and where the veil between worlds thins. They claim that certain hollows echo with voices of ancestors, and that crystal springs whisper cures to those who listen. Whether literal or allegory, these beliefs attest to the valley's power to shape human imagination and to beckon outsiders toward its guarded heart. As twilight deepens, shadows merge into a tapestry of black and green. The valley floor cools quickly, and fog seeps along the water's edge. You can hear the flutter of bat wings and rock fissures, and the soft chirp of crickets among leaf litter. Each sound feels magnified by stillness. Even the slightest movement, the tap of a falling pine cone or a marmot's breath resounds in the hush. If you passed back through the rim at midnight, you might think the valley belonged not to this world. The sky above the opening glows with stars, but below, a single lanternfish glow would shine like a distant galaxy in the deep. Here unbroken darkness unites all corners of the earth, yet the valley's light rests in its living heart, in the glow of moss under moonlight, in the shimmer of dew on a ghost fern, in the eyes of an ibex watching from a boulder. To sleep in such a valley is to dream with closed eyes. Imagine rising mists rolling through forested chasms. Imagine the first glow of dawn creeping down the walls. Imagine saplings leafing out in hidden groves. Let the shape of the canyon fill your thoughts. Steep walls protecting secret worlds, streams moving like silver threads, animals moving unseen. In that vision, you touch the valley's soul, a realm lost to time, sheltered by its own walls, and known only to those who listen in wonder. These valleys lost to time remain as they have always been, secure in their natural fortress, their ecosystems humming in secluded harmony. Though human ambition scales every peak, these deep, steep-sided valleys stand apart. They hold hidden springs and hidden creatures, hold stories older than any map, and as long as their walls endure, they will keep their worlds sheltered, whispering secrets to wind and water, awaiting only the most curious and respectful hearts to uncover their timeless mysteries. The forest breathes in shades of green, a living roof woven tight above hidden streams and secret glades. You step beneath its arching canopy, where daylight filters in soft vibrations through layers of leaves and lianas. Every footfall stirs a hush, fallen needles breaking underfoot, the distant rustle of hidden creatures. Here, summits and ridges recede into memory. The true challenge is not climbing up, but moving inward, where vines bind hands and roots trip even the most careful pathfinder. Canopies so dense they blot out the sky become cathedrals of shadow, their columns formed by ancient trunks wrapped in moss and epiphytes. In the perpetual half-light, air tastes of wet earth and floral resin. Fern fronds unroll like scrolls, revealing patterns older than any human script. The forest's walls rise on every side, thick tangle that keeps most travelers at the edge, gazing in with tools and ambition, but never fully entering. Some of these forests hold mysteries that defy explanation. In Romania's Hoia Baciu forest, trees grow in twisted circles, and paths vanish into undergrowth, said to pulse with unseen energy. Locals speak of lights that drift among trunks at midnight, and hikers report sudden disorientation, as if the woods themselves shift. Science finds no ghosts here, only thickets so dense compasses falter and GPS signals die in the green gloom. Far away at the foot of Mount Fuji, Japan's Aokigahara forest thrives in silence. Its ancient pines root into jagged lava flows, and ground cover so thick it blankets the forest floor in a carpet of needles and moss. Sound dies in its depths, no tweeting birds, no wind in leaves, only the crunch of footsteps on a path that disappears at the next tree. Beneath the calm, local legends warn of restless spirits. Each mist-shrouded hollow seems to guard its own secret. In southwestern Germany, the Schwarzwald Black Forest stretches in rolling hills draped with firs and pines. Folk tales of witches, wood sprites, and talking beasts grew from its shadowed lanes, where moonlight rarely reaches the duffed floor. Hikers who veer off marked trails may wander hours without sight of a clearing, discovering hidden streams and moss-capped stones that echo centuries of untold stories. Yet perhaps no forest challenges the outsider as deeply as Bwindi Impenetrable in Uganda, a primeval cathedral of green, untouched by roads. From 1,160 to 2,607 meters in elevation, its 331 square kilometers of bamboo, hardwoods, and ferns form a three-dimensional maze so dense that it earned its name, a place full of darkness. Half the world's mountain gorillas move through its understory, unseen until a careful tracker emerges on a narrow animal trail. Here, dense ground cover of vines and tangled roots blocks every axis of movement, making the simplest progress a test of patience and respect. Inside these walls, Biodiversity thrives in isolation. More than 120 mammal species share space with over 348 birds and 220 butterflies, each adapted to niches carved by layers of canopy and mist. Forest elephants roam silent corridors. Lianas spiral around trunks, creating suspension bridges for monkeys and rodents. Underground, caves honeycomb limestone ridges, hosting bats and blind fish that surface only at night to sip drips from stalactites. Reaching these depths demands more than mountaineering skill. Paths vanish beneath leaf litter. Rockfall blocks every narrow gully. Even local trackers carry machetes to brush away vines half a meter thick. Rain soaks the canopy, sending torrents through hidden gullies that can swell to raging torrents within minutes. A single misstep can strand a party in black-water labyrinths, waterlogged and shivering until dawn brings enough light to retrace steps. Within the forest's secret chambers, microclimates shape life in miniature worlds. South-facing slopes bake in midday sun, sustaining ferns and orchids that lean toward warmth. North-facing coves trap snow through early spring, nurturing ice-age relics of mosses and lichens. Where limestone outcrops bleed calcium-rich springs, rare ferns cluster on dripping walls, and tiny mollusks cling to damp rock, unseen by most visitors. Scientists who earn permits to enter these realms speak of new species discovered in single expeditions. Entomologists return with beetles whose iridescent shells match the forest floor's flickering light. Mycologists unearth mushrooms that glow faintly in the dark, their spores drifting in secret breezes beneath the canopy. Each sample yields genetic code that rewrites understanding of adaptation to extreme shade and humidity. Yet the true wonder lies not in tallying species, but in feeling the pulse of worlds so insulated they escape our eyes. Tarako calls echo through high branches before falling silent, and tiny chameleons shift color to match every leaf. Frogs the size of fingernails hide under decaying logs, their mating chants a rapid patter in mud. Spider webs lace between lianas, catching dew like glinting nets. Local communities revere these forests as ancestors' domain. They speak of healing plants known only to a few elders, leaves brewed for remedies unseen by modern pharmacies. They honor spirit guardians that dwell in sacred groves, refusing to fell certain trees even as the world's lumber mills reach ever closer. These taboos have preserved sanctuaries within a sanctuary. But impenetrable forests face threats from climate change and human encroachment. Rising temperatures push species upward until no higher refuge exists. Illegal logging carves silent scars. Roads built for timber extraction open hidden valleys to poachers. Even ECOTOURISTS-well- leave footprints that compact soil, alter water flow, and stress fragile wildlife populations. Conservationists advocate for dark zone protections areas, where access limits human impact at the bare minimum. Biologists train local stewards in monitoring rare species without intrusive camps. Satellite imagery identifies shifts in canopy cover. Acoustic sensors record unseen lives through dawn chorus and nocturnal calls. By combining ancient respect with modern tools, they seek to keep these forests unknown to casual intruders. To sleep under such canopies in memory is to dream with closed eyes. Envision stepping into a gorge where vines weave columns of green, water glistens only in sudden shafts of light, and no skyline exists, only an overhead tapestry of leaves. Feel the hush settle a gentle press on eardrums, and listen for a heartbeat older than any summit story. In that hush, these forests whisper their secrets to those who listen. And so, as the night deepens beyond the ridge lines and summits, let your mind descend into the secret realms of impenetrable forests. Remember that conquest does not mean discovery. A flag on a peak tells only a fraction of the mountain's tale. True exploration lies in the shadows beneath the canopy, where ecosystems flourish in hidden chambers, and where every footstep uncovers a world that has thrived without human notice for millennia. You step into the mouth of a mountain, just as dawn's first light fades from the peaks, and a hush settles around you. The air is cooler here, charged with the scent of damp stone and the promise of unseen passages. A ribbon of fog trails from the entrance, curling around boots and ankles like a silent greeting. Beyond the threshold, daylight dissolves into a muted gray, and every footfall echoes against walls, etched with the slow script of water. This is no mere cavity in the rock. It is the portal to a realm so deep that no rope can reach its bottom. No lamp can banish its shadows completely. Your headlamp scatters a halo of light across rough walls, revealing layers of limestone folded and fractured by eons of pressure. Stalactites drip with measured patience, each drop falling into a silent pool. Stalagmites rise obediently, as though waiting for the union that will sculpt them into columns. You brush a fingertip across a flowstone curtain, feeling its ridges like ripples frozen in time. The cave walls pulse with stories older than any living forest, on the surface stories of primeval seas, shifting landmasses, and the slow exhalations of stalagmitic breath. You rappel down the first shaft, a sheer drop of 50 meters framed by ropes that sway gently in the breeze of advancing bodies. Your descent brings you into a cathedral of stone, a chamber so vast that your headlamp's glow dissolves into a distant pinprick. Here, the ceiling curves in gentle arches, hung with draperies of calcite lace. The air tastes of limestone dust and cool moisture, and you inhale deeply, feeling each breath echo in your chest. Every step reminds you that you are a guest in a place that has never needed human presence. At the chamber floor, you replace your belay with a new rope and move toward a narrow slot where daylight once filtered, now lost to shadow. The walls squeeze inward, pressing cool stone against your shoulders, and you wriggle through a squeeze so tight that your movements must be conscious, deliberate. A wrong twist of the hip could mean a pause of hours before you can free yourself. In that moment, the world outside vanishes. No summits, no trails, only your pulse pounding in the quiet dark. Beyond the squeeze, a shaft plunges further into blackness. You train your lamp downward and catch a glimpse of a waterfall white streaks flowing from a ledge so high it vanishes into the gloom. The roar is a living thing, rising up from a river you cannot yet see, a river that has carved this chasm over millennia. You wonder how many kilometers of passages lie below, twisting through bedrock in a labyrinth no one has fully mapped. Some say this shaft continues for over a kilometer, an open gate to the planet's hidden arteries. You set up bolts for a second rappel and push off into the void. As you descend, air pressure shifts subtly, your ears pop. The descent feels endless, the rope stretching into a void that swallows light and sound. In your headlamp's beam, you see shadows detach from walls, shifting like living creatures, though you know they are only projections of your own mind. The lower you go, the more you sense the mountain enveloping you, its silent heartbeat pulsing through the rock. At last you reach a ledge and break the vertical passage. Before you stretches a gallery lined with gypsum crystals that glimmer like diamonds in your light. The chamber is smaller, a narrow canyon walled in satin-like ribbons of mineral. A stream bubbles through gravel at your feet, its water icy and clear. You cup your hands and drink, tasting the ancient filter of rock. In that simple moment, you feel connected to the mountain's deep memory, its waters born of melting snow and rain that once fell on peaks now lost to human sight. You follow the stream as it winds between boulders and through low arches, hopping from stone to stone. In certain reaches, the water disappears into swallows' holes so deep you cannot see where it goes. Local legends say these swallow holes lead to other worlds, carrying water through secret conduits into valleys miles away. Explorers have traced these currents with dye tests and follow-up dives, but the true extent of the underground river remains a secret guarded by the mountain's innermost walls. In quiet alcoves, you find delicate formations, helictites twisting into corkscrew shapes, speleothems that defy gravity, growing sideways, upward, and in spirals. You kneel to examine a patch of moon milk, a soft, chalky deposit that feels like fresh clay under your fingertips. Geologists trace its formation to microbial life, colonies of bacteria that shape rock as they move. In these subterranean galleries, life persists in forms unseen on the surface, feeding on scant nutrients carried by drips of mineral-laden water. Your headlamp catches movement in a distant shadow. A colony of cave crickets clings to a rock face, their long antennae probing for vibrations. They retreat into cracks the size of your fist, vanishing like memories. Later, you will learn that these insects subsist on the fruits of bat guano, carried by wings that slip in and out of the dark galleries above. They embody the cave's hidden food web, adapted to a world without sunlight, depending on travelers of the night who traverse the vertical shafts. As the passage widens, you glimpse the silhouettes of bison stalagmites' massive columns, where stalactitic flow dripped in one place for centuries. Their faces bear the scars of water erosion, a testament to the slow sculpting power of mineral-laden drops. You trace a fingertip along one column, feeling millennia of accumulation in its ridges. Here, time does not rush. It inches along at the pace of crystal growth, a slow cadence that outlasts human lifespans. Night falls even in the cave's absence of sun, marked only by the shifting feel of time on your skin. You set up camp in a twilight chamber, placing a small light away from the walls to cast shadows that dance across the ceiling. You eat a handful of granola and sip warm tea, tasting the contrast between your supplies and the silent world around you. In this suspended moment, you feel both small and enchanted tiny intruders in a domain that will endure long after your torch goes out. Your sleep is careful, wrapped in a bag that shivers in the cold air. You wake to the soft echo of dripping, a lullaby that has been sung for thousands of years. You rise and stretch, feeling bones creak in the cool. Filling a bottle at a dripping stalactite, you race the clock before exhaustion sets in. Every hour here is precious. The world above continues to turn, unaware of your presence deep below. You press on, following passages marked by numbers scratched on walls by earlier explorers. Tape flags guide you through the maze of side tunnels, but still the cave unfolds in unexpected turns, dead ends that circle back. Caverns that climb toward light you can never reach. Silt-choked sumps that glimmer like black glass. You record each bend, hoping that future speleologists can piece together the subterranean atlas. Yet you know that every year, moving rock and shifting water reconfigure the network, erasing paths as quickly as you document them. A narrow traverse leads you to a chamber where a flooded shaft glistens with the sheen of oil. You peer into its inky pool, unable to see the bottom. Light from your lamp reflects off the surface, signaling the existence of an underwater gallery. Cave divers who have followed these flooded tunnels report labyrinthine passages filled with silt and rotten air pockets. They wear rebreathers and guidelines, inching through sumps that can stretch for hundreds of meters. Few who enter these submerged parts ever return without scars, physical and psychological. In this chamber, you switch to drisuit and configure your dive gear. You run a reel line into the black water, feeling the tension in your arm as the first meters of line disappear. The water is cold, smothering any warmth in your suit. You kick gently, pulling yourself into the submerged void. Each breath echoes in your regulator, and the reel's click punctuates the hush. Ahead, the line flickers in your torchlight, leading into a world even scarcer of oxygen and light than the cave above. 50 meters down, you reach a ledge where the tunnel narrows overhead. Too tight for your shoulders, you unclip your tank and squeeze through, feeling chest plates graze limestone. On the other side, the space opens into a gallery where silt-choked boulders form a small chamber. You can see your torch's glow bounce off teeny crustaceans on the mud floor-blind amphipods that drift in currents of cold water. They move with slow deliberation, feeding on fragments of organic matter that drift from the cave's life above. Your lungs burn with the effort, and you signal to turn back. As you retrace your path, the black water closes behind you, swallowing the torch's beam until it becomes nothing but a dot. You emerge back into the air-filled chamber, hands trembling, vision sharpened by the contrast between water and rock. The cave opens before you in silent invitation, cracks to climb, shafts to descend, sumps to dive. As you begin the long climb toward daylight, your thoughts linger on the depths you have touched. You think of the kilometers of passage beyond your reach, of chambers yet untouched by human light. You imagine the creatures that dwell in branches of passage you will never map, feeding on bacteria, purging the rock of its chemical secrets. You carry in your mind's eye the cathedral of darkness, the subterranean rivers, and the shimmering pools that mock the sun's absence. Emerging at last into the fading afternoon, you blink against the brightness. Green hills roll away, distant peaks incomplete without the cave's shadow to ground them. The sun feels too loud, too invasive, yet you welcome its warmth on your face. As you shake off mud and rinse your gear in a cold spring, you realize that the mountain has yielded only a fraction of its secrets. Its interior remains a puzzle far deeper than any summit you have climbed. Back at base camp, you recount your journey, the vertical shafts, the underground streams, the flooded passages. Friends listen with awe, but they cannot feel the cold air on their skin or hear the cave's heartbeat in the dripping. They ask about wildlife, about maps, about depths. You share what you know, a few hundred meters of vertical drop, a handful of sumps, a labyrinth of tunnels, still largely unexplored. Yet even that sounds like myth. As night falls on camp, you dream of descending again. You picture the next rope drop, the cold plunge into sumps, the climb up sloppy mud slopes under a dripping ceiling. You imagine mapping new passages, naming new chambers, and discovering formations no one has seen. But more than that, you dream of entering the cave's endless depths in humility, knowing that its end may be far beyond human reach, a blank on the map forever. In the quiet hours before sleep, let this vision stay with you. The mountain's hidden entrails, the shafts that plummet into darkness, the rivers that vanish into voids, and the chambers that echo with a silence older than memory. For some caves plunge so deep that no expedition has yet found their ends, and in that unknown lies the purest call to wonder, a reminder that, beneath every summit, the earth holds secrets beyond our sight, waiting patiently for the brave souls willing to descend. You emerge from the forest and find yourself at the foot of a wall of stone, so sheer it seems to vanish into thin air. Before you, a cliff face rises straight into the sky, a seamless sheet of granite, basalt, or limestone carved by eons of tectonic uplift and sculpted by wind, water, and ice. No ledge interrupts its vertical sweep. No foothold offers purchase. This is the domain of sheer cliffs and impossible faces mountain walls that stand guard over hidden heights, keeping the secrets of their pinnacles safe from human passage. Pause for a moment and inhale the silence. Even the wind seems to hesitate before this wall, brushing past its base in soft currents before tumbling away. The air tastes of cold stone and distant snowfields. Above, clouds swirl around jagged cornices, wreathing the summit in mist and mystery. If you listen closely, you might hear the faint rumble of rockfall tiny pebbles, dislodged by frost, tumbling down the face in silent cascades, tracing the slow pulse of change. Across the globe, some of the world's most famous impenetrable walls have become symbols of the unknowable. Trango Tower in Pakistan's Karakoram stands over 1,300 meters tall. Its Great Trango Wall, the highest sheer rock face on Earth. Famed climbers have spent weeks on its granite, fixing ropes through storms and avalanches. yet the uppermost crags remain sparsely visited. The north face of the Eiger in Switzerland cuts a 1,800-meter swath of horror through the Alpine skyline. Known as the Mordwand, the Murder Wall, it claimed its first victims in 1936 and continues to test the courage of those who dare its icy overhangs. Hidden in Alaska's Chugach Range, the Mount Huntington Technical Wall rises 4,000 feet of ice and rock, a tapestry of glaciers and granite that climbers speak of only in hushed admiration. These walls exist because of the interplay of forces too vast for human lifetimes. Deep in Earth's mantle, plates collide and thrust crustal slabs skyward. Rivers and glaciers carve away the softer layers, leaving behind sheer escarpments that face the full fury of storms. Over centuries, freeze-thaw cycles wedge open cracks. Rain dissolves limestone, sculpting vertical karst towers. Wind polishes basalt into smooth, glide-like surfaces. The result is a barrier carved by nature's harshest tools, a cliff face that refuses to yield. Imagine yourself standing at the base early on a summer morning. The sun has just cleared the ridge behind you, sending a shaft of light that glints on quartz veins and mica flakes in the stone. Dust motes dance in the beam, drifting upward toward cracks no climber has ever threaded. You trace a line of dark streaks, ancient seepage channels, where mineral-rich water once oozed from the rock, leaving rusted scars. Tiny ferns cling to these streaks, rooting in the narrowest fissures, their fronds waving in the breeze as though celebrating survival against all odds. At the base of the face, beneath an overhang, you discover a hidden niche where snowmelt drips year-round. There, a single patch of alpine moss thrives, emerald usurpers on a throne of stone. In spring, delicate liverworts unfurl, and minutes pass before you realize the moss verdure is home to a colony of rock ptarmigan. They huddle in the niche, safe from predators and storms. Once you gaze upward at the cliff's towering buttresses, you wonder how these birds ever reach this ledge. The cliff's shelter nurtures them, and the air remains so cold that the moss never dries, creating a micro-sanctuary sealed off from the world beyond. Higher still, thin ribbons of snow carve diagonal paths across the face, remnants of wind-driven cornices that cling until midsummer. A single misstep on these fragile slopes can trigger an avalanche that erases years of steady progress. Sherpas and guides tell stories of climbers lost to hidden caves beneath unstable snow bridges, chasms yawning open without warning, swallowing rope teams whole. The cliffs guard their altitudes not with barbed wire or guards, but with avalanches, ice falls, and the sheer verticality that turns every ascent into a gamble. Yet beyond the hazards lies a deeper mystery. What lives on the summit, unseen even by those who have braved the climb? A handful of intrepid researchers have placed cameras on remote spires, capturing footage of snow leopards traversing narrow ridges, of mountain goats bounding across impossibly steep ledges. They glimpse rare alpine flowers blooming on tiny plateaus no climber dared to pause upon. Some summits reveal tarns carved into bedrock by glaciers, their crystal water home to plankton evolved in isolation. Each moment of discovery comes filtered through the lens of human daring and chance. And still the cliff faces keep their greatest secrets above the reach of rope and hammer. Sheer cliffs also harbor spiritual significance. In Tibet, the cliffs of Mount Kailash remain untouched by human hands, revered as the cosmic axis where earth meets sky. Pilgrims circumambulate its base in humble worship, never daring to ascend. Sacred legends warn that mortals who dare the face will be swallowed by wrathful gods. Similarly, in the Andes, the dramatic rock walls of the Cordillera Huayhuash are circled rather than scaled, pilgrims leading offerings at hidden amphitheaters carved by tectonic fury. These walls shape not only ecosystems, but also human imagination. Writers describe them as living cathedrals, their rock faces holding sermons in silence. Photographers frame their immensity in blue-hour light, capturing the interplay of shadow and form. Yet no photograph can convey the hush of windless air at the base, the scent of cold stone, or the tremor of awe when you look up into a void that swallows daylight. Climbing technology has pushed limits, but never erased the cliff's challenge. Ice screws anchor in frozen waterfalls, camming devices wedge into cracks, and dynamic ropes absorb the force of falls, but these tools grant only a fragile toehold. On the dawn of a big wall expedition, climbers haul bags loaded with a week's supply of water and food, only to be stranded when a sudden storm beats their jams closed. Fixed ropes remain draped like cautious lifelines, yet many pitches remain unclimbed, their belays abandoned to the patina of metal and time. Remote-controlled drones now skirt along cliff walls, mapping previously unseen buttresses. LiDAR scans reveal hidden alcoves where snow accumulates in year-round pockets. 3D models project possible lines of ascent, but the real world remains more complex than any digital terrain. These models cannot predict the sound of rockfall echoing through the void or the sudden collapse of a serac overhead. They cannot capture the willpower needed to stare upward at an unclimbable face and take the first hesitant step. In some ranges, sheer faces protect glaciers that have lingered since the last ice age. Hanging glaciers cling to cliff shelves, their ice walls tipped with cornices that drip into high-altitude lakes. The cliffs buffer these ice masses from sun and wind, preserving them long after lower glaciers retreat. As climate warms, the ice above the cliff slowly shrinks, but the face still holds it like a cradle. The resulting meltwater feeds hidden cascades and nourishes spring-fed streams below, sustaining life in valleys thought long divided from the ice's reach. At the cliff's lip, at the boundary between stone and sky, meteorologists have installed whispering anemometers to study wind patterns. They record katabatic flows, dense cold air tumbling off snowfields at dawn, and updrafts that can carry clouds across ridges. These data inform weather forecasts down valley and allow forecasters to predict sudden storms. Yet the true story remains in the winds and music against the rock. A deep moan when snow packs into cornices, a high whine when ridges slice airflow like a knife, a sudden hush when the wind changes. Beneath these cliffs lie hidden drainages, streams that cut slot canyons through solid stone at their base. Only a few explorers have ventured into these deep narrows, abseiling into dripping gorges where no daylight reaches. They find moss-clad boulders, snail trails tracing high-water marks, and bats roosting in niches untouched by the sun. Each canyon is a subterranean hallway leading to a place few humans ever see, a world as inaccessible as the summit above. And yet, the cliffs remain guardians rather than obstacles. They shelter rare species rock doves that nest on tiny ledges, alpine salamanders under boulder chokes, hardy grasses clinging in cracks. In Patagonia, the north face of Fitzroy hides lichens that thrive on wind-blown dust and moisture scoured from the Pacific. In the Dolomites, Dolophragmate orchids bloom in niches beneath overhangs, their roots drinking from mist alone. Each species holds adaptations written in DNA that speak of isolation and resilience evolution's quiet artistry behind a granite canvas. So let your mind drift along the base of these walls, tracing every spall and ledge your eyes can perceive. Imagine setting pitons in unyielding rock, feeling the spike bite into stone with a satisfying crack. Imagine pausing at the lowest belay, looking out at valleys you can't reach from here, knowing that the only way to glimpse them is from above a place you cannot go. Feel the taut line of rope beneath your hand, your breath measured by the flicker of your headlamp, your muscles alive with the tension of pursuit. In the hush of night, picture the cliff face lit by moonlight, a silver sheet shimmering against a velvet sky. Shadows pool in recesses, stars glint like distant beacons of possibility. Below, campfires flickering base camp's tiny points of warmth and light at the edge of the stone. Above, summit ridges lie cloaked in shadow, untouched by footprints, carrying the promise of landscapes no human has ever fully known. As you drift toward sleep, let the image of sheer cliffs and impossible faces fill your thoughts. Know that beyond ambition and gear, these walls stand as monuments to the planet's geologic history and to nature's refusal to be tamed. In their verticality, they protect hidden realms, underscore that not everything is meant to be conquered, and that some heights remain sacred in their isolation. Their secret lives whisper to us through every crack and crevice, reminding us that the most profound discoveries often lie beyond the reach of our greatest efforts, waiting patiently in the silent grandeur of the impossible face. You step onto slick river stones where torrents from distant snowfields converge. The water's roar fills the chasm, a living hammer shaping rock by stroke after stroke. Here, in the heart of the mountain, rivers carve secret paths, gorges so steep and narrow they remain hidden even on the best topographic maps. Each rushing fall slices through stone like a blade, revealing layers of earth older than the tallest peaks above. Lean close and feel the spray on your face. Listen as the river whispers of hidden worlds where no human foot has lingered long enough to outrun time itself. Higher still, the headwaters begin as a trickle meltwater dripping from dawn-warmed snowpack. You follow its course up narrow ledges carpeted with moss and ferns, where fragile shoots brace against the current. By midday, those gleaming ribbons of water swell into a churning artery, bearing the pulse of the mountains downward. Every bend in the stream marks an unseen ravine, a secret corridor carved over millennia. The river, as relentless energy, flanks you with walls of gray limestone or red sandstone limbs of rock that hold the current in tight embrace. In some ranges, these hidden canyons plunge more than 1,000 meters below the summits. Nepal's Kali Gandaki Gorge yawns between Annapurna and Dhaulagiri, deeper than the Grand Canyon where the river keeps its charge. Few trekkers venture beyond the trading outposts that huddle near the rim. Downstream, villages perch on narrow benches of rock, their terraces clinging to slopes no mechanized plow could tame. Here, barley and buckwheat thrive in microclimates created by swirling eddies. The river's mist nourishing fields that no camera drone has ever fully surveyed. China's tiger-leaping gorge seethes with legend and whitewater alike. Local lore speaks of a tiger's mighty leap across its narrowest span, but the walls remain so sheer that no bridge can span them. Walking trails cling to the cliff face, offering glimpses of the river far below, yet beyond those switchbacks lie chasms unvisited. In the hidden recesses, bamboo groves whisper in shaded recesses, and salamanders with vivid markings slink beneath damp stones, seen only by furtive moonlight. Each gorge hosts its own ecosystem, a tapestry woven from water, stone, and living things. Rock walls draped in ferns shelter rare mosses that flourish on the constant spray. In clefts you find endemic orchids and impatiens, their blossoms poised above eddies. Pools hidden beneath boulders cradle trout and minnows that have evolved tolerance to frothing currents, their streamlined bodies darting in the dark. Dragonflies patrol these sanctuaries, their iridescent wings glistening in half-light as if lit from within. Listen to the canyon's voice, a low rumble where rapids collide, a hiss where water seeps through limestone fissures, a series of harmonious notes as droplets tap the riverbed. In remote ravines, hydrophones record acoustic webs of fish calls and insect plucks echoes of life that cling to darkness. Scientists deploying underwater recorders discover new species every season. Blind loaches in subterranean streams, cave shrimps that swim backward, tiny crustaceans that dine on decaying leaves washed in by spring floods. Mapping these secret paths is a feat of both art and engineering. Satellite imagery hints at shadowed lines, but cannot penetrate the steepest drops. Explorers employ drones to peer into narrow slots and drop weighted cameras on tethers into sump pools. They release biodegradable dye at unseen bends and track its emergence at hidden springs miles downstream. Each discovery reshapes our understanding of where the water goes before it meets the great river below. Some ravines remain locked by climate. In the High Sierra, the headwaters of the Merced River tumble through Mist Falls Canyon, yet beyond the well-trod footbridges lies the Lost Valley, a hidden amphitheater of granite cliffs lined with hanging meadows and glaciers no hiker has ever named. Spring rains swell the creek into wild surges that sweep away footbridges, cutting off access for years. Only experienced mountaineers equipped for river crossings dare to plunge into that labyrinth. Cultural stories entwine with the ravine's mysteries. In the Andes, Criollo legends speak of spirit guardians, Pachamama's sentinels, who abide in hidden chasms where silver veins glint in the walls. Shamans journey to secret waterfalls to gather water said to heal ailments unseen by modern medicine. They follow faint footpaths along torrent-fed gullies, arriving at grottos where vaporous mists rise like spectral veils. The geology of these gorges reveals Earth's hidden biography. Strata of shale, sandstone, and marble lie exposed in 1,000-meter sections. By tracing mineral layers, geologists reconstruct tectonic collisions and ancient seas. In some canyons, fossil-rich limestone shelves yield trilobites and brachiopods from epochs when this ridge lay beneath a tropical ocean. Each new specimen offers a snapshot of life before the mountains ever existed. Extreme species thrive in these gorges. Waterfall-climbing snails graze algae from vertical rock, anchoring themselves with snail-foot suction. Ice-cold pools at the canyon base harbor stoneflies and caddisflies unique to a single river. In deeper reaches, amphibians breathe through skin alone, absorbing oxygen from fast-flowing, oxygenated water. Tiny springtails leap among moss cushions, feeding on fungi that flourish in damp shadows. Flowing water also carries nutrients downstream, linking hidden gorges to highland forests and fertile valleys. Salmon spawn in rare deep pools above waterfalls, accessible only by leaping fish. Their carcasses then feed ravine-dwelling bears and birds of prey, depositing marine minerals high in the mountains. In turn, the river transports woodland detritus leaves, twigs, insect falls, creating a spiral of life that spans from canopy to canyon floor. Explorers measure ravine depths with laser rangefinders and echo sounders mounted on kayaks. Whitewater paddlers navigate narrow slot canyons, battling Class V rapids that form after heavy rains. In winter, icicles drape canyon walls like swords of glass, and ice climbers ascend frozen waterfalls to reach ledges where rare lichens cling. Each season rewrites access. Floods carve new channels. Droughts reveal dry riverbeds strewn with geodes. Beyond physical challenges lie bureaucratic ones. National parks protect many canyons, but permits are scarce and expensive. Protected corridors often end at the rim, leaving ravine interiors in legal limbo. In some countries, cross-border rivers slice through disputed mountain ranges, cutting corridors that no human authority fully controls. Here, the river's power overrides geopolitical lines, carving unity in stone. At night, ravines sing under moonlight. Waterfall mists catch silver beams, creating ghostly rainbows in midair. Owls call along cliff edges, and chirps of nocturnal moths fill the humid air. Under the canyon roof, bats flit between rock outcrops to feed on stream-borne insects. Bioluminescent fungi glow on fallen logs, casting a gentle radiance across the darkness. Scientists studying canyon microclimates discover cool pools where temperatures remain constant year-round. Such refugia support species lost from lower slopes by warming climates. Genetic studies reveal remnant populations of cold-adapted insects isolated for millennia. These gorges act as living museums, preserving life forms that vanished elsewhere during past warm periods. Efforts to protect these gorges evolve beyond scenic overlooks. Conservationists establish river sanctuaries that include entire canyon systems, forbidding dams, mining, and logging in tributary watersheds. Community-based tourism trains local guides to lead small groups through hidden ravines, sharing knowledge of plants and wildlife. Photographers publish immersive panoramas that capture the canyon's immensity, inspiring respect rather than conquest. Rivers carve not just gorges, but paths of possibility for future research. Glaciologists trace sediment layers washed in by past ice ages, reconstructing climatic cycles over tens of thousands of years. Hydrologists monitor flow regimes, studying how mountain snowmelt patterns shift with warming temperatures. Ecologists map food webs that link subterranean springs to high-altitude wetlands, revealing networks of interdependence that transcend the canyon walls. For adventurers, walking along these river rims is a lesson in humility. Every step demands awareness of loose scree underfoot, of surging currents waiting to sweep away a single misstep, of overhead rock faces that shed pebbles without warning. Progress is measured in meters, hundreds of difficult ones, rather than kilometers. Yet each vantage point offers a new perspective on the canyon as secret core, a cascade of hidden pools, a ribbon of white water threading through emerald undergrowth. Perhaps the most profound secret of these hidden paths is time itself. In the rhythm of the river, you sense the slow unfolding of epochs. The stone beneath your fingers was once sand on an ancient shore. The canyon's depth is measured in millions of years. A single drop of water may take centuries to journey from headwater to outflow, its path twisting through unseen joints and caverns. In that time, only the river remains constant, a force that both erases and reveals. To venture into these ravines is to partake in a dialogue with the mountain. The river speaks through stone and spray, in whispers and roars. You listen in silence, feeling the pulse of earth beneath your boots and the breath of wind through hidden crags. Each turn reveals a new world, a late-blooming gentian perched on a sunlit ledge, a gecko clinging to dripping walls, an inaccessible alcove where lantern-light glowworms cluster on drips of water. And so the river flows on undaunted by maps, impervious to roads. It forges its secret path through the mountain's heart, sustaining life in its hidden belly. Though human hands may graze its banks, the deepest ravine floors remain out of reach, sanctuaries for creatures and ecosystems that thrive in shadow. The river's song continues, a testament to the mountain's hidden geometry, and a call to those who would follow its winding, untamed course. You step from the winding trail onto a high, windswept plateau and feel the air thin with altitude. Before you lies a flat-topped summit, a broad table of stone and grass, stretching to ragged cliffs that drop into valleys hidden from every side. Here, at this roof of the world, ecosystems cling in isolation. The mesas and tablelands of the Andes, Tibet, and Venezuela-Guyana shield plant and animal communities found nowhere else. These high plateaus are islands of life, cut off by cliffs and air, harboring the singular and the strange. Across continents, high plateaus share a story of uplift and erosion. Sedimentary layers once flat as sea floors were thrust skyward by tectonic collision, then painfully sculpted by wind, rain, and ice. Hard caprock sandstone in the Tepe, basalt in Ethiopia's Bale Mountains, granite in Tibet resist erosion, creating tablelands with vertical walls. Rivers gnaw away at softer flanks, carving steep canyons that isolate each plateau in a fortress of stone. To reach their interiors, plants and animals must conquer cliffs or cross sweeping valleys, barriers few can breach. Isolation is the crucible of endemism. On Venezuela's Mount Roraima, the summit is a world apart, mist-shrouded, wet, and cloaked in carnivorous Helianthera pitcher plants, whose tubular traps glow with nectar and trap insects in pools of rainwater. Rare orchids and bromeliads grow on mossy rocks, their roots seizing every drop of moisture from the cloud forest air. Frogs no larger than a fingernail like the pebble-toed Oreophenella dwell in crevices, their feet splayed to cling to slick stone. No similar species live on the surrounding lowlands. These plateaus are evolutionary petri dishes. In the Ethiopian highlands, the Sameti Plateau rises above 4,000 meters like a vast green plain. Here, giant lobelia and senecio, trees towering 6 meters tall, form surreal groves. Their rosette leaves funnel meltwater to central stems, sustaining them through freezing nights. The plateau is the last refuge of the Ethiopian wolf, the world's rarest canid, whose red-coated pack hunts mule deer and rock hyrax on tussock grasses. Galata baboons climb basalt cliffs to sleep on narrow ledges, a troop of chattering politicians perched above empty air. On the Tibetan Plateau, the world's highest and largest wide expanses of alpine meadows bloom for weeks in summer. Snow lotus and Saussuria delavai cling to scree slopes, petals reclining in sunlight that glows pale with altitude. Herds of Tibetan antelope chiru graze on hardy sedges, their slender horns framing a sky of turquoise. Plateau pika dart beneath boulders, their simple keystone roll compressing plant biomass into hay piles that store winter calories for marmots 40 centimeters long. Golden eagles wheel overhead, mastering the thin air. The Andean Altiplano sandwiched between two volcanic chains hosts high-altitude salt flats and shallow lakes where flamingos congregate by the thousands. In the Azozig Depression of Bolivia, Andean flamingos dip their heads in brine, filtering algae and tiny crustaceans. Behind them, the plateau's flat expanse is broken only by the cinder cones of extinct volcanoes, their heights offering rare vantage points. Vicuña, with coats so fine they command fiber prices rivaling cashmere, graze in herds, their soft muzzles searching for tufted grasses invisible beneath a sheet of frost. These plateaus are not barren deserts. They are cradles of specialized life. Cushion plants, a carpet of tight rosettes blanket windswept rock, reducing heat loss and conserving moisture. Their blooms erupt like bursts of light, ruby silver swords in Hawaii's Mauna Kea summit, white androsace in the Himalaya. Beneath them, solitary alpine snails hide in gelatinous shells that resist freezing. In winter, snow covers them in a protective blanket. Come spring, they resume grazing on mosses and microalgae. Lake ecosystems on plateaus mirror the isolation overhead. Lake Titicaca, perched at 3,800 meters between Peru and Bolivia, harbors Orestius killifish that exist nowhere else. These small fishes navigate underwater rocky shelves, their colors muted in green-stained depths. Water lily of genus Nymphea form floating gardens each morning, their blossoms opening to high sunlight only to close at dusk. Lake Titicaca's waters flow through hidden outlets, nurturing farmland hundreds of kilometers downstream, yet remaining cut off from the Amazon basin. Sheltered plateau pockets form cloud forest-shrouded galleries where moss-laden oaks host epiphytes. In Colombia's Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, a plateau sits 5,700 meters high, its summits remaining ice-capped until recently. Here, patches of humid forest cling to ridges. Bosque de Niebla, harboring golden poison frogs, hummingbirds with gorget feathers of electric blue, and orchids that release scent only at sunrise. The valleys below weave maze terraces, but the plateau's interior remains wild, its canopy a tangle of roots and bromeliads. Isolation has also occurred on dry plateaus. The Pura grasslands of Argentina's northwest lie at 4,000 meters, a windswept sea of tussock and cushion that supports viscacia rodents. These rabbit-like creatures dodge condors that wheel overhead. Scavenging viscacia remains to feed chicks. At night, the plateau cools below freezing. Silver foxes prowl among volcanic rock, their thick coats insulating them through ice storms that bury the grass in ankle-deep snow. Human history intersects these plateaus in unexpected ways. On Peru's Amatepe Plateau, pre-Inca temple ruins perch at 3,000 meters above sea level, marking sites of ancestral rituals to honor mountain deities. Yet terrace farming ended centuries ago, leaving stone walls and canals to rust under grass. Now, palmivores forage on wild lawns and cactus that colonized abandoned terraces. Another chapter in the Plateauia's story of abandonment and renewal. Climate change threatens these isolated realms. As temperatures rise, tree lines creep upward, invading precious alpine meadows. In East Africa's Bale Mountains, montane forest edges advance on ericaceous moorlands, squeezing highland endemics into ever-shrinking refuges. Glacial meltwater once sustained cold streams that fed plateau wetlands. Now, diminishing ice threatens spring flows vital to species adapted to narrow temperature ranges. Conservationists race to map endemic hotspots, critical plateau pockets where rare frogs, salamanders, and grasses still thrive. Mining poses another challenge. The Tibetan Plateau is known to hold vast lithium-rich brines beneath its salt flats. As extraction begins, water tables drop, altering wetland hydrology and drying springs that feed alpine meadows. In the Alps, plateau rivers fertilize valley farms. Upstream gravel quarries have rerouted streams, impacting trout spawning grounds that sustained local inns for centuries. Plateau ecosystems, buffered by cliffs, can't adapt as swiftly to altered water flows. Yet hope glimmers in concerted conservation. National parks like Peru's Manu protect tableland cloud forests and adjacent plateaus, connecting summits to lowland reserves. UNESCO biosphere reserves span Ethiopian plateaus, supporting pastoralists who herd cattle seasonally yet respect sacred grassland groves. On Hawaii's Mauna Loa, alpine lava-capped plateau zones house native silver-sword plants in fenced exclosures, free from feral goats and invasive weeds. Each protected plateau becomes a beacon for endemic survival. Local communities often carry traditional knowledge vital for plateau stewardship. Tibetan nomads practice rotational grazing on summer plateaus, moving yak herds before grass exhaustion. They recognize sacred knobs, small mesas where prayer flags flutter, and grazing is forbidden to protect medicinal herbs. In the Andes, Quechua shepherds revere puna grasses as offerings to Pachamama Mother Earth, harvesting only sustainable bundles. Their cultural practices form living partnerships with endemic species. Scientific exploration of these plateaus continues to uncover surprises. In 2023, botanists found a new alpine buttercup on a remote Tibetan mesa, its petals the palest blue. DNA analysis suggested a lineage split from lowland relatives 3 million years ago. Similarly, entomologists mapping Venezuela's tepui discovered a new genus of butterfly, its metallic wings camouflaging against mossy sandstone, a testament to evolutionary artistry in isolation. Plateau lakes also offer paleoclimatic records. Sediment cores drilled from highland tarns reveal pollen spectra tracing vegetation shifts through ice ages. Geochemical analyses of volcanic ash layers link ancient eruptions to widespread plateau forest debacks, unraveling the interplay between climate, fire, and isolation. These records guide modern restoration, suggesting which plant assemblages to reintroduce as conditions change. As dusk falls on a high plateau, the air cools rapidly and the sky darkens in an unbroken arc of stars. The Milky Way's ribbon spans the zenith as the plateau's summit stands bathed in moonlight. The cliffs that guard its edges drop into blackness where unseen ravines pulse with nocturnal life. Phalaropes feeding on tiny midges above lakes, nocturnal lizards basking on sun-warmed stones that hold residual heat. In that silence, the plateau reveals its true face, a living mosaic of evolution's most isolated masterpieces. These isolated plateaus remind us that life can flourish in the most forsaken places when given time and shelter. Their flat summits and hidden plateaus hold species and landscapes found nowhere else, priceless jewels of Earth's biodiversity. As we map, explore, and conserve them, we honor the mountain's silent promise that the most extraordinary discoveries lie not where the view ends, but where the cliffs begin, on the edges of what we know and the vast unknown beyond. The mountain stands wrapped in ghostly veils of cloud, its summit vanishing into ragged curtains of mist that swirl and twist in silent wind. From below, those clouds look like spirits drifting between earth and sky. And it is here, where humans can't follow, that legends are born. When people first gazed at peaks shrouded in perpetual fog, they saw more than rock and ice. They saw doorways to other worlds, ramparts guarding dragons' lairs, and the thrones of gods. Across continents, every unreachable crag became a canvas for the imagination, and the mist itself emerged as a living force, animating stories passed down through generations. In the towering ranges of the Himalayas, Sherpas speak of Yeti tracks found in fragile knee fields, footprints that vanish where frozen snow meets wind-swept rock. They tell of a great ape-man hempill, taller than any man, its hair soaked with glacier melt, who wanders above tree line, alone but not lonely, a guardian of hidden valleys. Villagers claim to have heard its mournful call echoing through cold nights, a voice that warns travelers not to trespass on sacred ground. To the Sherpa, the Yeti is not simply a monster, but the mountain's own spirit, incarnate in a form humans cannot tame. Further east, in the mists of Japan's sacred Mount Fuji, the Tengu dwell among the pine-lined slopes. Part bird, part man, these spirits once wore the faces of crow-headed guardians, with feathery wings and crimson masks. They taught ascetic monks secret arts of swordsmanship and magic, then vanished as the fog peeled back at dawn. To this day, pilgrims leaving prayers at Fuji's torii gates believe the Tengu still watch from hidden temples carved into cliff faces, correcting missteps and protecting the mountain's sanctity. The morning mist, they say, is their breath. Across the sea in the Rocky Mountains, Ute and Shoshone tribes tell of the thunder being's immense winged creatures that roost on high ledges beyond human sight. When storms gather, those cliffs crackle with their calls, and lightning dances along crests where no animal could survive. The thunder beings are both benevolent and fierce. They bring rain to parched plateaus, yet punish those who defile water springs. Even today, mountaineers report sudden wind gusts in clear skies, as if invisible wings beat against the stone. In Europe, the Alps cradle dragons in their deepest caverns. Peasant tailies recall fire-breathing wirums that hoarded gold beneath glaciers, their scaly hides gleaming in torchlight. The legend of the Tatzelwurm the Serpentine, cat-like creature, persists in the high Bavarian woods and Swiss pastures, where shepherds swear they glimpse its sinuous form disappearing into rock fissures. Some say the Tatzelwurm is a guardian of lost valleys, guiding worthy souls to hidden springs. Others claim it is a warning. Venture too far into the mist, and you risk awakening an ancient hunger. In the Andes, the Incas worshipped Apus, the spirits of the highest peaks, each mountain its own god. On quiet mornings, villagers leave offerings of coca leaves and chicha at mountain shrines, believing the Apis control weather and fertility. The rugged summits above Cusco, still crowned in snow, are said to crack open in winter, releasing ice spirits who dance across llamas herds. When cloud banks close in, farmers below light fires and sing prayers, calling Apis to spare their crops. To them, the mist is not mere moisture, but the breath of benevolent deities. Venezuela's Tepuy pierce the sky like floating islands, their flat summits lost in swirling low clouds. The Pemen people revere these mesas as the home of the sun, father, and mother, moon immortal beings who made the world's first sunrise. They believe that jaguars and giant condors roam those lonely plateaus, their roars and cries echoed by unseen echoes. In the thick mist that shrouds the cliffs, shamans sense portents of rain and fortune. They chant to the heavens, asking permission to harvest medicinal plants growing only on the Tepuy edges, where roots cling to thin soil and wind-blown seeds take root. African highlands carry myths woven through centuries. On Uganda's Ruwenzori Mountains, and Mountains of the Moon, the Bakanzo speak of Bunyip, a spirit serpent hidden in glacial lakes. When hikers camp by Lake Kitandara, some report ripples forming without wind, as if a colossal creature passed beneath. They burn sage and drum to calm Bunyip's restlessness, lest he flood the valleys below in a tantrum of ice and rain. The mist here clings to black ooze cliffs, and every rustle in the bamboo groves suggests a shape moving just out of reach. The indigenous peoples of North America gifted the Cascades with their own guardians. On Mount Rainier, the Puyallup described the Shadow Man, a colossal figure fashioned from living mist and stone. He stands watch over the mountain's glaciers, shaping them with his giant hands, keeping the peaks from succumbing to summer's heat. When the mornings are clear, they say he retreats, yet on rainy days, hikers glimpse a silhouette etched in clouds. They leave offerings of salmon and tobacco, hoping to appease the mountain sentinel and secure safe passage. In China, the Huangshan Yellow Mountains rise like spines through rolling seas of cloud. Here, legends tell of Taoist immortals who drifted among the jagged pines, stamping eternity into needles and granite pillars. They battled demons among hidden caves and drank from spring pools unseen by ordinary eyes. Pilgrims clambering along precarious switchbacks glimpse inscriptions, carved on cliff faces, prayers left by souls who sought enlightenment in mist-draped temples. The granite peaks hold echoes of chanting monks, and even now, tourists report a sudden hush when the fog descends, as if time itself stops to listen. On Tenerife's Mount Tide, Guanche myths retell how Guayota, the evil spirit, imprisoned the sun inside the volcano's depths, covering the land in eternal night. Only through heroic acts of the righteous could the sun be freed, restoring warmth and light. The crater remains a place of power, where volcano fumes swirl into clouds that drape the summit in a white shroud. Spaniards later built chapels on Tide's slopes, yet many believe Guyota still lurks in hidden vents, his breath stirring the mountain's mists at dawn. In the mountains of Polynesia, the Tongans speak of Ahoifakoa, the spirit guardians of volcanic peaks. They dance in the sulfur clouds of Mauna Loa, shaping lava flows with chants carried on trade winds. Sailors sketch the volcano's silhouette against night skies, attributing each eruption to Ahoifakoa's restlessness. The mists drifting above the lava tubes are said to be their cloaks, drawn close in winter storms, revealing and hiding the spirit realm in equal measure. Scotland's Highland peaks host the Shen Gol mountain hounds of mist and moonlight. They prowl the slopes of Ben Nevis and Cairngorm, their eyes glowing amber as they chase deer through hidden quarries. Ghostly bagpipes sometimes carry across the glens, a call to the hounds and a warning to travelers. Celtic lore prescribes leaving small offerings of whiskey and barley at stone markers to earn Shen Gol's favor, without which a lost soul might wander the mountains forever, swallowed by swirling fog. In India's western Ghats, the Kani tribe tells of Manulay, the forest goddess, who slips between shadowed knolls. She bears the face of a fawn and the hair of vines, her feet never leaving the mist-laden earth. When monsoon clouds cloak the plateaus in green, her laughter echoes through tree canopies, and waterfalls dance in joy. She protects medicinal herbs rare as gold, teaching healers their secrets only if they prove gentle and true. To tread the Ghats without Manulay's blessing is to court misfortune. Mythic serpents also slither through the Rockies under a different name, the flathead serpents of Blackfeet lore. They say the Gahuka, half-snake, half-human creatures, hide in cave entrances where waterfalls vanish into fissures. They slip into the plateau's depths, reaching hot springs and geothermal vents. Elders warn young hunters to leave offerings of cloth and tobacco at those hidden mists, lest the Gahuka appear and strike with venom not of this world. In Newfoundland's tablelands, the Beothic spoke of giants that dwelled in the high rock plains' moonlit guardians, whose footsteps left hollows that filled with water, and became isolated ponds. Here, caribou and Arctic fox congregated, and Beothuk hunters believed the giants protected these herds from human overhunting. They respected the ponds, weaving wreaths of berries to honor the guardians. Even today, hikers find woven wreaths at the edges of those ponds, reminders that myth can endure in every hidden hollow. On the flanks of Mount Kenya, the Kikuyu tell of Mukuru, the god of the hidden mountain realm, who breathed rain into the clouds that linger at mid-altitude. Mukuru's breath-shaped ridges and dells watering coffee plantations far below. In the dense mists that rise each morning, farmers believe they glimpse Mukuru's silhouette, a giant face carved in vapor. They plant their crops with their backs to the mist, offering the first fruit to Mukuru in thanks for the mountain's bounty. Even modern accounts spark wonder. In 2014, mountaineers on Patagonia's Cerro Tor reported seeing a great winged shape in the swirling snows. Its wingspan eclipsed the width of their tent. Some called it a prehistoric pterosaur. Others suspected a trick of lights reflecting off ice crystals. The mist refused to clear until they left the campsite. They bore no photographs, only stories. What is it about these unreachable heights that spawn such tales? Perhaps it is the very mist itself, a living veil that hides crevasses and cliffs, stirs the imagination, and suggests that something unseen waits beyond our sight. When rock walls dissolve into fog, the mind fills the void shapes take form. Voices emerge from silence, and the boundary between earth and spirit blurs. A past that feels safe one moment can vanish the next in a swirl of vapor, as if the mountain is breathing. Legends speak of dragons, too. In China's Kunlun Mountains, the azure dragon guards an eternal spring, its scales glinting in the morning dew. Pilgrims leave incense at cavern mouths, praying for health and fortune. In Wales, the red dragon of Snowdon sleeps beneath the summit, stirring only when invaders climb too boldly. Dragons in these tales are not mere beasts, but embodiments of the mountain's power untamed forces that command both reverence and caution. In the southeastern United States, Cherokee elders tell of Spearfinger, a stone-skinned monster whose finger is a jagged flint spear. She lurks in mountain fog, preying on unsuspecting travelers. The only way to avoid her is to carry a bag of knots, each knot an offering to the mountain spirits, who shield the knots and guide the lost out of the mist. Even now, hikers pack knotted cloth charms, half in jest, half in respect. These myths, passed from elders to children, form the mountain's living oral archive. They teach respect for hidden waterfalls, the timing of snowdrifts, and the trick of the wind in particular gullies. They warn where avalanches start, where hidden crevasses yawn, and where the mist lingers longest. In every story, humans learn to read nature's subtle signals, to honor its mood swings, and to accept that some paths remain secret guarded by gods, dragons, and spirits born from mist. Even as mountaineers conquer ridges and GPS maps every contour, these unseen worlds endure. For every cable car that promises easier access, there remains a couloir no net can span, a chasm no rope can bridge, a valley no drone can chart through roiling fog. The mountain's myths thrive in those shadows, keeping the memory that not every height is meant to be reached, and that some mysteries remain beautiful in their mystery. When you gaze at a mist-shrouded peak, you see more than a silhouette. You glimpse an invitation to wonder. The dragons, gods, and spirits of the mountains beckon not as enemies to be defeated, but as guardians to be honored. Their legends remind us that humility belongs on every summit, an acknowledgement that we stand not above nature, but within its most elusive chapters. And in that recognition, the mountain's secret worlds remain alive, translated anew in every whispered tale born from mist and mystery. Indigenous peoples around the world carry in their hearts maps of mountain places hidden from outside view valleys unspoken of in guidebooks, cliffs considered dangerous to tread, and peaks reserved for ceremonies that mark the cycles of sky and earth. These landscapes are more than terrain. They are living ancestors, teachers and keepers of knowledge, passed down in stories, songs, and rites. To approach them casually is to risk offense or misstep. To be invited in is to enter a contracted relationship of respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. In the American Southwest, the Dine, Navajo Four Sacred Mountains define the boundaries of homeland. East sits Sinagini, Nt. Blanca, whose red sandstone crags glow at sunrise. South rises Tsudziu, Mount Taylor, its slopes once cloaked in pine and aspen. West looms Daibin Sa, San Francisco peaks, snow-capped for half the year. North stands Duku Uzwade, Mount Hesperus, its summit often shrouded in cloud. Each mountain is a person, a grandmother or grandfather, with its own medicine and teachings. The Dain are taught that these peaks protect their people, that water flows from their springs to nourish fields of corn and squash, and that ancestral spirits dwell in their hidden caverns. Only those trained by elders may enter certain ledges to harvest medicinal plants. The rest are warned that disrespect brings drought or illness. In the Andes, the Aymara and Quechua communities revere the Apus spirit guardians of each high peak. Huascarán, Alpamayo, Osangit. These mountains are alive. Their snowfields an altar for offerings of coca leaves, chicha, and llama fetuses. Few outsiders witness the sacred stone cairns, or apachitas, where pilgrims pause on arduous treks. They deposit stones to honor Pachamama, Mother Earth, asking permission to cross glaciers and steep passes. In return, the Apis ensure safe passage, stabilize rockfalls, and send rains to irrigate terraced fields far below. Further north, in the Himalaya, Sherpa villagers speak of Khumbu's hidden valleys with reverence and caution. Tengboche Monastery sits at 3,860 meters, but beyond its prayer flags lie remote glacial lakes deemed forbidden. Yak herders know secret routes spiraling around Kalitz and Kangtiga, where snow leopards stalk ibex in silence. When a young Sherpa undergoes the coming-of-age ritual, he must fast for 3 days at a hidden cave high on the ridge. Only there will he receive blessings of strength from the mountain gods. Orla. Trekking companies offer spiritual treks, but only lone Sherpa guides possess the oral maps of places where the gods dwell unseen. In Australia, Aboriginal clans hold Uluru and Katajuda as sacred dreaming sites. Climbers once drove pitons into the red sandstone until Anangu elders successfully lobbied to close the route. In the crevices of Uluru's base, they point out waterholes and plant pockets used for bush medicine, locations never marked on tourist maps. Jukurpa dreaming stories warn that certain caves hold jintir butterflies, spirit messengers whose wings mark the land with signs only the initiated can read. When monsoonal rains flood the central desert, elders travel quietly to secret waterholes, replenishing family obligations in ways that outsiders cannot fathom. Down in Venezuela's Guyana Shield, the Pemen know the Tepuy Table Mountains rising from rainforest, like islands in a green sea, as the abodes of the Sun Father and Mother Moon. Mount Roraima.'s hidden cave entrances hold pools of crystalline water used only in the most solemn ceremonies. Guides will lead travelers to the summit plateau, but true access is controlled by village consensus. A small group of shamans may perform rituals at dawn's first light, invoking the ancestral sprites said to shape mountain mists into living forms. Those invited bear gifts of cassava bread and tobacco. Those who ignore taboos risk being lost in swirling fog for days. In New Zealand, Maori Iwai tribes hold peaks like Aoraki, Mount Cook, and Taranaki as tabuna, ancestors. Aoraki's heart lies in glacial chasms, where only Tohunga, priests, may enter. When Aoraki's snow is tinted pink or green at sunrise, tribes interpret the event as messages from the ancestors' warnings or blessings for the coming season. The Haikarangi Plateau, though lower in elevation, holds Tapu Taputea, a sacred marrow of rock where Koriro stories speak of ocean deities who shaped the mountains. The Haka ceremonial dance often references these hidden places, embedding geography into language and lineage. In Africa's highlands, the Maasai skirt the ridges of Mount Kenya, speaking of all Lalokwa's hidden grottos where Engai, the creator, sealed precious medicines. They encourage youth to learn the chants that protect these caves, for they believe each one houses a spirit of rain. The Mbobot forest on MT, Algon's plateau, belongs to the Sangwar people, who regard its towering trees as their mothers. Government conservation projects, well-intentioned but misguided, once evicted families, severing the link between people and ancestral woodland. Sacred groves vanished, along with the knowledge of which totems and herbs thrived in which forks of the valley. In North America's Pacific Northwest, the coastal Salish tribes speak of Mt. Rainier, Tahoma, as the throne of the creator Thunderbird. Beneath its summit bowl, hidden geothermal springs bubble from cracks in rock places marked only by tribal elders. They perform winter solstice ceremonies at spirit lakes ringed by hemlock groves, believing that the salmon people rise to feed forest streams. The Quinault and Yakama tribes have negotiated accords that close certain waterfalls to fishing, to protect not fish, but the spirits believed to dwell in the cataract spray. In the Caucasus, the Svan people guard the glacial valleys of Ushba and Tetnaldi. They carve crosses in cliff walls to ward off avalanche spirits, then cross snowfields at dawn on pilgrimage to hidden meadows of Edelweiss. Their folk songs speak of mermaids who surface in hidden tarns, luring shepherds to their doom. Only the eldest Svan elder knows the location of the Muro, valley a canyon said to house an iron door leading to the mountain's heart. The myth insists that those who enter without proper ceremony never return. These communities teach that mountains breathe, that rock fractures fill with water and spirit, and that knowledge of hidden spaces warrants kinship rather than exploitation. Oral maps encode topography through stories. The path to a hidden spring is described as the place where the sun's reflection hits a mossy boulder at midday. A cave entrance is marked by the song of bats at dusk. A cliff ledge is known by the pattern of lichen, resembling a hawk's wing. These details guide harvesters seeking herbs, hunters following game, and ritualists seeking vision. Access to sacred spaces is often governed by protocols passed from generation to generation. Young lurs accompany elders on pilgrimages, carrying water jugs or weaving prayer offerings from local grasses. They learn to read the mountain's temperament when the wind shifts to warn of an impending storm, when the scent of pine intensifies to signal ripening berries, when the hush of snow settling presages whiteouts. The knowledge is holistic. It blends ecology, spirituality, and social order. Outsiders sometimes mistake this guarded intimacy for secrecy or superstition. Yet these mountain guardians understand the fragility of their ecosystems and the perils of casual intrusion. In Ethiopia's Bayo Mountains, the Harena forest once open to hikers closed following uncontrolled tourism that trampled wild coffee groves and disturbed endemic wolf dens. The Uoromo declared the forest a cafe under Gada law, prohibiting extraction and demanding ritual offerings before any entry. Their leadership restored wildlife corridors and reduced soil erosion, demonstrating that spiritual guardianship can align with conservation science. In Canada's Stataimc territory, the peaks of the Coast Mountains hold XWYSTE, Bridge River, and Syquelax. The SKWXWMesh, Squamish, and Lilwat nations practice mountain stewardship under Sna 7 Aches Temlax, keeping the mountains in trust. They deposit offerings of salmon scales at stream outlets and map hidden quartz sites for ceremonial use. These protocols were codified into the Sea to Sky Corridor Land Use Plan, closing certain alpine basins to ski development and mining. The result? Sustainable tourism that respects both spiritual laws and economic needs. Even within a single mountain range, different clans may hold distinct sacred sites. In Taiwan's central mountain range, the Atayal and Banan peoples regard different peaks as the abodes of tiger spirits or ancestral sages. They bury the remains of their elders in caves, known only to particular lineages, and avoid crossing thresholds where the dead reside. Researchers working under cultural protocols map biodiversity in these areas, guided by elders who point out nesting sites of endemic pheasants or groves of rare bamboo. Modern cartography struggles to reflect these intangible landscapes. Topo maps show elevation and contour lines, but rarely note that a hidden glade at 2,600 meters is reserved for initiation rites, or that a saddle at 3,500 meters is taboo to cross on certain calendar dates. Collaborative mapping projects now overlay GIS layers with indigenous place names and access rules, empowering communities to manage their own landscapes while sharing sanitized versions for recreational hikers. The revitalization of indigenous languages has strengthened these connections. When a Quechua elder recites a place name, Chuspi Wilka, the sacred Fly Valley, listeners hear both the phonetics and the mountain story. How ancestral travelers escaped an avalanche by finding refuge under moss-clad overhangs. The name itself encodes survival lessons, unwritten on signs but imprinted in memory. Sacred spaces also shape responses to climate change. As glaciers retreat, elders lead climate observers to hidden ice caves, once thought permanent. These caves hold insects frozen for centuries, and young researchers learn from elders how to interpret ice stratigraphy through local environmental indicators, such as the timing of mountain berry blooms. In turn, scientists measure glacial mass balance, integrating both scientific data and indigenous observations of snowfall patterns, avalanche frequencies, and medicinal plant cycles. In these collaborations, indigenous knowledge offers exquisitely detailed microclimate data. When a morning mist consistently lingers in a high valley, or which gullies trap cold air that kills blossoms overnight. These insights refine scientific models, while mapping the movement of species that follow shifting temperature envelopes. As global warming shifts tree lines ever higher, elders note rare orchids displaced from plateaus, prompting rapid assessment and seed banking before genetic lines vanish forever. When governments consult these knowledge holders, management plans honor both the land's spiritual dimension and ecological thresholds. In New South Wales, Australia, the Bunjalung and Gumbaynggirr jointly manage Dorrigo National Park's high plateau, closing parts of the Antarctic beech forest to visitors and reinstating fire regimes conducted by indigenous rangers. These cultural burns clear undergrowth, reduce wildfire risk, and encourage germination of native grasses practices rooted in millennia of mountain stewardship. The wisdom of sacred spaces teaches that landscapes are conversations between past and present, human and non-human. Hidden valleys are not empty. They bear the footprints of ancestors, the burrows of endemic rodents, and the wings of raptors patrolling unseen thermals. Cliffs and caves are not mere features. They are thresholds to other realms where spirits linger and elements conspire, where the rules of everyday life yield to the deeper laws of balance and reciprocity. To journey into these places is to enter a partnership. One does not conquer or conquer. One listens, offers, and observes. Offerings may be tobacco, fireweed blossoms, or silent respect, small gestures in the face of mountain majesty. Observations may be notes on seasonal transitions or sketches of lichens clinging to schist. Over time, the plateau opens its flowers, the canyon gurgles its hidden tributaries, and the summit reveals patterns etched in snowfields. For outsiders embarking on mountain adventure, the first step is to ask, who are the traditional custodians of this land? Next, to learn the protocols. Which passes are open? Which valleys require ceremonial permission? What offerings sustain the spirits? Modern guides carry binders of permits, but the true portal is an invitation from elders an oral contract to honor the place as living cosmology. In honoring these agreements, we ensure that hidden mountain places remain vibrant even as maps fill with contour lines, trails guide boot prints, and drones capture overhead views. For indigenous knowledge teaches us that not all treasures lie at summits. Many dwell in crevices, in the hush of mist, in the ripple of a secret pool. These are the sacred spaces beyond casual exploration, places of encounter between Earth's deep memory and human hearts ready to listen. Even with satellites scanning the planet night and day, there are places so stubbornly concealed that they remain virtual ghosts on our screens. High-resolution optical imagery may show every ripple of sand in the Sahara or every contour of Antarctica's ice shelves, but cloud cover, haze, and the limits of light still conspire to hide valleys carved by millennia of glacial melt. In tropical mountains, thick canopies swallow wavelengths before they reach the forest floor, leaving entire ecosystems submerged in a green blur. Radar and LiDAR pierce some of those leaves, but each method brings its own blind spots. Radar can't tell soil from rocks, and airborne LiDAR can only sweep narrow swaths at prohibitive cost. The result is a jigsaw puzzle with pieces missing at the center. Even after decades of remote sensing, whole landscapes elude us. In the control rooms of geospatial companies, analysts study hillshade maps derived from satellite altimetry, their screens aglow with bands of green and gold. But each pixel may represent a square 100 meters on the side. A tiny sinkhole, a clandestine cave entrance, or a steep swale carved by flash floods would vanish in that resolution. On mountainous islands where ravines are hewn by typhoons, entire valleys narrower than a football field remain no data zones. When typhoon season arrives, even synthetic aperture radar, which can see through clouds, loses acuity standing water, and swirling debris scatter the signal like noise in an old radio. Nature, it seems, still speaks in dialects that our instruments struggle to translate. Drones promise to fill those gaps, hovering at low altitude to peer beneath canopies and along cliff walls. In practice, though, they bump against new barriers: dulled propellers in freezing altitudes, turbulence in narrow gorges, and GPS drift where canyon walls block satellite signals. A battery good for 20 minutes on a calm prairie might last only 10 when buffeted by katabatic winds off a glacier. Beyond that, one must haul spare packs through scree and snowfields to swap power cells, turning a quick survey into a multi-day expedition. As a result, many proposed drone corridors across remote mountains remain theoretical, their flight logs unfilled by real missions. When weather cooperates, drones gather breathtaking data: centimeter-scale surface models, plant species maps, even thermal images of hidden mammal burrows. Yet the canyon floors where fresh streams emerge often sit in a blind spot. The deep walls above cast shadows that drone sensors can't penetrate. Shadows in optical data translate to black voids in 3D reconstructions, and no amount of photogrammetry can retrieve what never received light. Engineers have experimented with mirror drones that cling to vertical faces and peer around corners. But these harpoon-like devices struggle with brittle rock, and every retrieval risks equipment lost in a crevice far below. Satellites don't face those altitude headaches, but they confront their own constraints. The sun-synchronous orbits of most Earth-imaging satellites limit observations to the same hour of daylight, meaning high latitudes surface only in low-angle morning or afternoon sun, when long shadows can obscure details. At polar extremes, periods of continuous darkness slam optical sensors into inactivity. When the clouds part in spring, the snow reflects so much light that images saturate, washing out the subtle color differences used to distinguish rock types or vegetation. To compensate, researchers turn to thermal infrared, but the coarse resolution of those bands, often hundreds of meters per pixel, collapses, small features into smudges of color. Even airborne LiDAR, with its promise of penetrating vegetation to reveal the bare earth, faces practical limits. Survey aircraft must fly low and slow, navigating tight corridors above elusive ridges. Weather delays can stretch from days to weeks. The balloons and kites once used for canopy studies have largely disappeared, replaced by drones that need frequent maintenance. And the final LiDAR point clouds can run into terabytes for a single watershed data, so massive that processing becomes a contest of computing power rather than cartographic skill. Smaller research teams must partner with national mapping agencies just to handle the files. On the ground, climbers and surveyors still confront an age-old truth. Some rock faces simply cannot be measured. Steepness exceeds the safety margins of surveying gear. Laser rangefinders misfire when reflected off mirror-smooth ice. The only option is to guess the vertical angle through a binocular estimation. And when the surface breaks into overhangs or deep undercuts, statistical models extrapolate geometry that no one has actually seen. Those best guesses form the basis of many 3D elevation models, meaning entire subfaces of the world's walls remain hypothetical. Beneath those faces, caves and subterranean passages mock our ambition. Ground-penetrating radar can sketch shallow karst features, but its signal attenuates quickly in limestone thicker than a few dozen meters. Geophysical surveys detect voids when conducted from the surface, but they lack fine, detail-wide underground chambers appear as fuzzy anomalies. Even the simplest mammoth chamber, once discovered, demands spelunkers and safety ropes, and the most remote sites are simply unreachable. As a result, the true extent of underground river networks and hidden aquifers remains largely a matter of speculation. Underwater mapping faces parallel hurdles. Bathymetric charts drawn from ship-mounted sonar leave whole ocean basins at 1 kilometer resolution, with only shipping lanes and continental shelves detailed at tens of meters. The deep ocean trenches and underwater mountains, more numerous than those on land, are out of reach to most research vessels. Autonomous submarines do sweep some of these depths, but gigabytes of data collected per dive can take years to analyze. Seismic surveys reveal sounding profiles, but they too are sparse and unevenly distributed. As a result, the majority of the seafloor remains a shadow world, an unmapped frontier on our own planet. Weather remains nature's ace in the hole. Monsoons, snowstorms, and hurricane bands can ground satellites, drones, and aircraft alike. The stormy tropics feast on weather-resilient drones, while the polar airs nip at propellers. Fog in valleys can smother footprints that sensors might follow. Sound scattering in humid air can make acoustic altimetry useless. On Earth's wettest slopes, cloud forests linger between 2,000 and 3,000 meters, precisely the altitude where most remote sensing systems have the hardest time. For weeks or months, these zones can disappear from all our surveys, as they're winked away by the mountain gods themselves. Even if we conquer the data acquisition challenges, we face the limits of interpretation. Algorithms trained on known landscapes falter when confronted with truly novel topography-folded limestone labyrinths, landslide-scarred flanks, or summit plateaus hidden by persistent temperature inversions in radiosonde profiles. Machine learning models can misclassify exotic geology as noise or smudge together separate ecosystems into a single land cover type. Human analysts refining those models still need ground truth. Boots on the ground, and there is simply not enough manpower to verify every remote sensing anomaly in the world as rugged interiors. The limits extend into real time. Satellites revisit locations in multi-day cycles. Drones require human deployment. Mapping life cycles lag behind environmental change. A valley map today may be reshaped tomorrow by landslides triggered by an earthquake nobody predicted. Volcanoes can deposit new lava flows overnight, altering drainage patterns. Glacial surges can raise moraines and carve new channels in a single season. Our maps are always a step behind a living document of a world that never stands still. Beyond the technical, there's the human dimension. Geopolitical issues can bar access to certain regions. Closed military zones, disputed borders, and protected cultural sites restrict the launch of drones and surveys. Researchers must negotiate permits, respect local customs, and often yield to tribal or national sovereignty. Even a cleared flight plan can be scuttled by sudden bureaucratic decisions, leaving high-value regions unexamined by our latest tools. Looking ahead, emerging technologies promise incremental gains. Satellite constellations with sub-meter resolution, drone swarms coordinating like murmuring starlings, quantum LiDAR that promises to pierce deeper into ground layers. Each breakthrough heightens expectations. But the same old barriers will persist: weather, logistics, and the sheer complexity of dynamic landscapes. No single innovation can render everything transparent. Unexplored terrain will always outpace our finest instruments. In the end, perhaps the most profound limit is our own perception. We may map every contour, catalog every species, and measure every canyon, yet whole realms of rock and mist will remain beyond our grasp, protected by rugged terrain, hidden in the folds of time and veiled by the caprice of clouds. Those shadows are not failures of technology, so much as invitations to humility. They remind us that Earth's final frontiers are not only found at the edges of maps, but also in the spaces between data points, in the mists that refuse to clear, and in the remote places that whisper, "Some things are meant to be mysteries." You climb above the tree line until the still air grows thin and the world below unfolds in a quilt of ridges and valleys. Here, beyond the reach of everyday life, mountains become living time. Capsules, galleries of ice and stone, where ancient species and vanished landscapes lie frozen or entombed, waiting for the slow retreat of glaciers and the patient eye of the explorer. In these heights, the past persists alongside the present, offering rare glimpses into climates and ecosystems lost to deep history. On Wyoming's Beartooth Plateau, at over 3,000 meters, warming temperatures have begun to reveal a forest sealed in ice for nearly 6 millennia. In 2024, researchers from Montana State University uncovered 30 subfossil whitebark pines, stumps and logs standing upright as though still rooted in the ground. Radiocarbon dating showed these trees grew between 5,950 and 5,440 years ago, at a time when summers were warmer and tree lines soared far above today's limits. As the modern ice patch melted, it exhumed needles, cones, and even intact bark, granting scientists a window into a mid-Holocene world where high-altitude forests once flourished. These pines, preserved by centuries of ice, reveal both the dynamism of mountain ecosystems and the vulnerability of alpine tundra under climate shifts. Half a world away, atop South Africa's Table Mountain, another chapter of deep time plays out. The summit's 500-million-year-old sandstone forms an island in the sky, its flat top isolating pockets of fynbos flora that evolved nowhere else on Earth. Botanical surveys have cataloged hundreds of endemic species, strap-like heathers, and delicate proteas that trace lineages back to ancient Gondwanan forests. These sky islands serve as living laboratories for evolution, preserving plant assemblages that withstood ice ages and shifting rainfall patterns. When fire swept surrounding slopes millennia ago, the summit's sheer cliffs shielded these species from destruction, turning Table Mountain into a refuge where evolution paused and diverged. Beyond these dramatic examples, mountain time capsules abound in caves and tarns hidden above the permanence of snowfields. In the European Alps, ice caves near 3,000 meters preserve arthropod exoskeletons and pollen grains locked in frozen layers. These subterranean vaults contain records of vegetation, succession through the last glacial maximum, and the warm periods that followed. In one Swiss cave, scientists recovered beetle fossils and pollen that, reconstruct climate oscillations over the past 15,000 years data, only accessible because the cave Isa's permafrost remained undisturbed by human footfall. On the Tibetan Plateau, glacial moraines have begun yielding Neolithic tools and bone fragments of yak and antelope, buried by successive ice advances. Permafrost soil holds ancient DNA profiles of plant communities, revealing that willow and sedge meadows once stretched to elevations now dominated by barren rock. As summer thaws deepen, researchers excavate layers of preserved dung, each pellet a microfossil archive of diet, seasonality, and habitat use by early herds. The DNA extracted from these pellets paints a picture of a plateau where human and animal migrations intersected in ways lost to modern pastoralists. High-altitude lakes become gravitational bowls for sediment and pollen, layering millennia of environmental change beneath their waters. In the Sierra Nevada, Lake Tahoe's deepest basins hold Varve's annual layers of silt and clay that encode tree ring-like records of precipitation and fire frequency. When divers collect cores, they retrieve packets of organic material, including charcoal fragments from centuries-old forest fires. Analysis of these cores has reframed our understanding of drought cycles and tribal burning practices by early Native American inhabitants. Farther south, in the Andes, kettle lakes left by retreating glaciers cradle remains of freshwater fish species isolated since the Pleistocene. These highland fish, some blind and albino from millennia in darkness, survive only in remote tarns above 4,000 meters. When climate fluctuations reconnect these lakes, pulses of water allow rare gene flow, but most of the time, each lake is a genetic island. Biologists study these species to understand speciation in isolation and to gauge the resilience of glacial meltwater habitats under rapid warming. The Mediterranean's calcareous mountains hide endolithic communities in mountain hollows. Cryptic algae colonize rock fissures at 2,500 meters, tolerating freeze-thaw cycles that shatter less hardy organisms. When tiny chips of this rock are analyzed, they reveal ancient cyanobacteria lineages that once dominated Earth's surface billions of years ago. These living fossils endure on cliffs where weathering erodes away the rest of the biosphere, testifying to life's ability to cling to the most hostile substrates. Glacial erratics boulders stranded on alpine slopes often rest atop talus fields with lichens older than any known tree. Radiocarbon dating of these lichens indicates continuous growth for up to 8,000 years, their thalli expanding millimeters per century. Under each boulder lies microhabitats of springtails and mites, organisms that emerged after the local ice sheet retreated but remained trapped by scree and permafrost. These invertebrate refugia allow scientists to track post-glacial colonization patterns at microgeographic scales. Even the air above mountains serves as a time capsule. Snowfields trap atmospheric particles from centuries past. Ice cores drilled from Andean summits show spikes in lead and mercury dating to the Roman Empire, when smelting activities polluted skies far from the source. Layers of volcanic ash, deposited from eruptions in the Pacific Ring of Fire, lie as discrete bands in ice, enabling precise synchronization of climate records across hemispheres. The chemistry of each layer narrates volcanic winters that dimmed sunlight and reshaped ecosystems thousands of kilometers away. On volcanic plateaus, lava tubes preserve delicate cave flora and fauna untouched by surface catastrophes. In the Four Corners region of the American Southwest, lava beds at 2,800 meters contain mossy banks of liverworts and springtails that subsisted in stable tube climates for eons. Drilling into these tubes reveals pollen from Pleistocene forests, once higher on the slopes, now replaced by sagebrush and pinyon juniper woodlands. These subterranean records confirm ecological shifts driven by glacial interglacial cycles and human land use. The biogeographic relays of mountain time capsules also encompass alpine meadows where endemic wildflowers wax and wane with each pulse of warming. European scientists monitor the Juncaceae cushions in the Dolomites. These mat-forming plants show growth rings like trees, each concentric layer marking a summer's growth. By coring these mats, researchers count upwards of 3,000 annual rings, reconstructing centuries of temperature and precipitation data with sub-decadal resolution. The plateau of Mt. Fuji harbors peat bogs at 2,500 meters that preserve pollen and insect remains dating to 8,000 years ago. These bogs record transitions from pine oak woodland to subalpine scrub, parallel to the development of early rice cultivation in Honshu. Peat stratigraphy links global monsoon patterns to local ecosystem resilience, as early farmers depended on predictable mountain snowmelt for irrigation. On Kenya's Mount Kenya rock basins at 3,800 meters, hold tarns whose sediment layers contain ancient spores of tropical forest plants, and the bones of hippos that once swam at these heights when East Africa's climate was far wetter. These fossils show a colder, wetter environment more akin to tropical lowlands than the current alpine desert. As temperatures dropped, forests receded, leaving isolated pockets of Afro-alpine cushion and giant lobelia that anchor today's highland wildlife. The sheer cliffs of Patagonia guard webbed networks of Nunataks rocky islands jutting through ice fields. In one nunatak at 2,900 meters, bryophyte mats dated to 10,000 years ago persist in a microclimate moderated by solar heating of south-facing walls. Genetic analysis of these mosses reveals divergence from coastal populations since the last ice retreat, highlighting the isolating power of ice and the mountain's role as both barrier and crucible. Appreciating mountains as living time capsules calls for a convergence of disciplines: glaciology, paleoecology, genetics, and anthropology. Indigenous oral histories often mirror these scientific records, describing forests on peaks now barren and tales of ancestors gathering wood at heights no longer forested. When elders recount that their forebears harvested berries at the current snow line, that memory can guide researchers to search for subfossil fruit skins in nearby ice patches. Yet the same forces that unveil these time capsules, global warming and ice melt, also threaten their preservation. Ancient subfossils exposed on modern slopes can desiccate within months, losing the organic threads needed for radiocarbon dating. Ice caves collapse under warming nights, and permafrost soils thaw, unleashing greenhouse gases and altering hydrology before scientists can sample them. The urgency to document these living archives has never been greater. To protect these hidden treasures, multidisciplinary teams now race to extract ice cores and sediment samples under the shadow of retreating glaciers. High-altitude camps serve as fly-in bases where climatologists and biologists work side by side, drilling, sieving, and photographing subfossil remains. Geneticists preserve DNA in field labs. Glacial geologists map ice extents with drones. Anthropologists record indigenous knowledge of ancient landscapes. In these endeavors, mountains remind us that time is layered, that the present rides upon the shoulders of deep history. Each summit, plateau, and cave is a page in Earth's biography pages, written in wood, stone, and ice. By reading them, we gain perspective on our own era's rapid changes, learning how ecosystems responded to past warming and cooling. Mountains, by preserving these records, offer both warnings and wisdom. They show that life can persist in refugia long after surroundings transform, yet also that no environment remains immutable under the forces of climate and time. As explorers, scientists, and communities work to decipher these living time capsules, we acknowledge that many chapters remain unread. For every glacier melting, another holds secrets deeper than any drill can reach. For every plateau surveyed, countless recesses await discovery. The mountain's vaults beckon us to listen, to slow down, to ascend gently, and to hold history in our hands before it vanishes again into the rush of thawing water. In these heights where yesterday meets tomorrow, we glimpse the deep story of life itself. You stand on a rocky ledge, the thin air tugging at each breath, when far below you hear a muted thunder, not the roar of a crevasse collapse, but the distant hiss of snow sliding free of a hidden cornice. In an instant, a wall of white surges downhill, tearing trees from their roots and sweeping stone like thrown dice. This is an avalanche, nature's juggernaut, unstoppable once it begins, and one of many perils that keep humans hemmed to a thread of safety, unwilling to cross into the realms where even the boldest instruments cannot shield us. Avalanches start where wind packs snow into unstable slabs atop weaker layers buried by seasons of winter storms. A single misstep, perhaps a skier testing a snowpack, firmness, or an ice climber carving steps can trigger a slide hundreds of meters wide. In 2012, an avalanche on Peru's Alpamayo swept away an entire team of mountaineers within seconds. They had approached the summit ridge under crystal skies, unaware that a storm 3 days prior had created hidden layers of sugar-like crystals beneath the surface. When that slab released, it carried everything in its path: tents, ropes, and the voices of climbers swallowed by the roar of rushing snow. Landslides share this sudden violence, though with earth, rock, and debris. They can be anchored in seismic jolts, fault line ruptures that loosen mountain flanks, and in prolonged rains that saturate soils. In the monsoon season of 2015, a landslide near Nepal's Langtang Valley engulfed a village of 144 homes, rerouting rivers and reshaping the landscape. Terraced fields vanished as though erased by an artist's brush. Survivors spoke of a low rumble that grew into a crushing roar. And then silence, a landscape reset in moments, its memory preserved only in scattered boulders and buried traditions. Visibility can vanish at a moment's notice in high mountains. Whiteouts, fog banks, and cloudbursts conspire to erase every landmark. A sudden storm can transform a sunny ridge into a hellscape of driving sleet. In the Rockies, summertime thunderstorms form as quickly as they dissipate, spawning hail larger than golf balls and lightning that claps like cannon fire. Hikers pinned to exposed cliffs by thunderous winds have found themselves unable to move. Every step risked a fatal slip or a direct strike. Storm cells that outpace the sun's heat can trap climbers overnight in temperatures plummeting below freezing. Their only shelter a fragile tent that flaps violently in the gale. In the Himalaya, storms can wrap a peak in swirling veils of wind and snow, blocking oxygen-rich air as rain freezes on ropes and ice axes. When a team on Everest's South Col in 1996 encountered such a squall, they dug snow anchors and huddled together, only to discover that the wind's fury raised the tents several feet off the ground. The oxygen tanks rattled loose, and in the darkness, they realized they had become prey to forces beyond calculation. Storm wind speeds exceeding 160 kilometers per hour wind chill, plummeting to 40 degrees below zero, and oxygen levels so low that even breathing pure air felt like inhaling needles. Thin air is itself a peril. Above 5,500 meters, each breath delivers half as much oxygen as at sea level. On the 8,000-meter giants, every inhalation becomes a struggle. Cells starve, brains fog, lungs leak fluid. Altitude sickness can be mild, a headache and nausea, or it can spiral into high-altitude pulmonary edema, HAPE, or cerebral edema, HACE, conditions often fatal within hours. In the past decade, rescue helicopters have reached higher altitudes thanks to new technology, but above 7,000 meters, they cannot hover. The only way down is to descend on foot, and descending requires physical strength the thin air can see supply. Even in lower ranges, crevasses yawn beneath weak snow bridges, waiting for a footfall to crack through. Glacier travel demands tethered safety lines and constant probing with ice axes. Yet hidden false bridges formed by snowdrifts over underlying streams can collapse under the weight of a single pack. In the Alps, Glaciologists surveying the mer de glace found that warming trends were creating more such hazards. Meltwater rivers enlarging subterranean caverns until the roof gave way without warning, sending instruments and investigators tumbling into the dark. Rockfall is another silent killer. Freeze-thaw cycles wedge rock apart, causing thousands of pounds of stone to break free each year. Climbers pass under rockfall avalanche paths with the same nervous awareness that pedestrians have walking beneath old brick facades. In Nepal's Annapurna circuit, a well-known section of trail was rerouted after a period of intense freeze-thaw produced a new rockfall corridor, one so active that no fixed ropes could guarantee safety. Local guides mark a clear zone of avoidance, stepping aside when they hear the subtle tinkle of pebbles dislodged high above. The scarcity of oxygen also hampers any rescue or exploration technology. Drones can carry cameras up to 6,000 meters before spec battery and rotor performance plummets. Even then, their flight time is measured in minutes rather than hours, and sharp winds can send them spiraling out of control. Ground-penetrating radar struggles through permafrost, and seismic sensors become unstable as the ground contracts in extreme cold. The very technologies we rely on falter in the same thin air that robs us of physical prowess. Deep within mountain valleys, flash floods transform seasonal streams into churning maelstroms. Glacial lake outburst floods, GLOFS, occur when moraine dams give way, releasing millions of cubic meters of water within minutes. In 1985, Lake Digsho in Nepal's Khumbu region breached its moraine barrier and unleashed a floodwave that swept away bridges, lodges, and farmland. The event wiped entire communities from the map and left researchers scrambling to adjust risk models for the hundreds of other glacial lakes clustered beneath the world's highest peaks. Even when pathways appear clear, mountain weather can turn on a dime. Temperature inversions trap cold air in valleys, while ridges above bake in the sun, creating thermals that lift currents of heavy air and tumble them in unpredictable whirlwinds. On Mont Blanc, paragliders have vanished when updrafts flipped their canopies, sending them spiraling into hidden faces. Helicopter pilots know never to hover beneath a ridge during summer thermals. The downdrafts can crush a rotor in seconds. Isolation compounds all these dangers. A climber injured above 4,000 meters may have to wait hours, sometimes days, for a rescue team to navigate treacherous terrain. Mobile signals vanish beneath crags, and satellite phones can be blocked by narrow chasms. In winter, avalanche danger closes most helicopter permitting, leaving stranded parties reliant on rations and the hope that a ridge clear in the morning offers descent. Supply lines break, and what begins as a manageable incident can become a multi-day survival ordeal. Landslides and avalanches often cascade in chains. A rock slide can dam a river, creating a temporary lake that bursts downstream hours later. In high mountain Asia, researchers have cataloged over 100 such cascading events in the past 50 years, each one amplifying disaster zones and shifting hazard maps. Villages once thought safe below a rock slope find themselves in the path of a new outburst flood triggered by a fresh slide. The complexity of these interactions defies static mapping. A newly formed scarp can erase entire valleys and create hazards along lines no human has walked. Beyond the physical, there is the psychological peril. The isolation, the thin air, the constant uncertainty, they chip away at morale. Climbers report tunnel vision, irrational fears, and the nagging dread that a simple mistake will doom them. Fatigue dims judgment. Hunger impairs motor skills. Hypoxia dulls reflexes. Teams can fracture as each member confronts the mountain's unforgiving torrent, some pressing onward in denial, others frozen in fear. The perils are not only external, but also in the war within each individual's mind. These hazards help explain why some mountain regions remain stubbornly unexplored. Valleys narrow into slot canyons filled with slippery boulders and swollen streams. Cliffs soar in blind walls that repel even the most skilled climbers. Remote wilderness lacks water sources reliable enough to support prolonged missions. Weather windows narrow to hours, and only the sure-footed and well-prepared can make a safe passage. Even well-funded expeditions must often turn back, concluding that the risk outweighs the discovery. In areas of political instability, these natural perils become amplified. Border zones in South America's Andean highlands combine landslide-prone slopes with bandit threats and landmine remnants. In Central Asia, remote peaks lie across contested territories where rescue services may not respond. Mapping these places by satellite offers a view of icy ridges, but never reveals the true danger of a sudden blizzard or a thaw-triggered avalanche perils too immediate for any remote sensing technology to anticipate. Climate change accelerates many of these hazards. Warming trends increase the frequency of rain-on-snow events, creating pinholed layers of ice that slide more readily. Glaciers retreat, leaving steep, unstable slopes where once there was support. Permafrost thaws, loosening what was once frozen solid. Avalanches and landslides cascade into fresh territory, making no routes obsolete. Explorers who planned on familiar patterns face new surprises. A glacier that now features seracs towering over once flat passages, or a snowfield that transforms into a morass of silt and water. Even everyday risk slips on icy ledges, frostbite from exposed skin, dehydration from inadequate water sources compound to raise the bar for any expedition. Drinking water may taste off from mineral runoff or microbial contamination, requiring purification that wastes precious fuel. Solar panels on their tent roofs may fail in overcast storms, leaving no light for communication or cooking. Frozen pumps refuse to draw water from snowmelt. Each technical detail combines into a burden on an expedition's margin for error. In this space of layered perils, it becomes clear why so much of the high mountains, the steep gorges, and the remote plateaus remain unknown or only partially charted. For every map marking a trail, there are dozens of blank spots where sensors cannot penetrate, where storms never let drones hover, and where data gaps can mean life or death. Satellite imagery can hint at topography, but cannot sense a slab of snow ready to give way under a human's weight. Radar can sketch ground motion, but cannot predict the precise moment when melted permafrost shifts a boulder into motion. Yet exploring these frontiers has never been solely about mapping every crevasse. It is about humility in the face of nature's raw power. It is about accepting that some ridges guard secrets that only wind and time will reveal. It is about knowing that perils, avalanches, landslides, storms, thin air are nature's reminders that the planet's peaks remain Earth's final wilderness. Unfinished stories written in stone, ice, and fleeting snow. And so, much remains unknown, not simply because we've lacked curiosity, but because the mountains themselves insist on keeping their deepest passages uncharted, reserved for seasons and storms we may never fully command. You lean over the ice field, the Antarctic wind biting through your layers, as a radar beam reveals a jagged ridge hidden beneath kilometers of ice. Beneath your boots lies a buried mountain range, its peaks and valleys sculpted by ancient tectonic upheavals. This wasn't a speculation. Researchers drilling through the transantarctic ice in the last decade retrieved rock cores that, when analyzed, showed grain ages and deformation histories far older and more dynamic than anyone imagined. What we once thought a static cold desert revealed itself as a living archive of continental collision, rift dynamics, and cycles of mountain building. In that moment, Antarctica transformed from a simple ice sheet into a partner in our understanding of Earth's deep-time geology. In a Norwegian mining tunnel under the coastal mountains, scientists first ignored a side passage choked with rubble and frost. But when they shone flashlights into the darkness, they saw bones and antlers glinting in the lamplight remains of an ice age community trapped for more than 75,000 years. Arnkongrota Cave yielded polar bear skulls, walrus ribs, and codfish vertebrae from a vanished Arctic interstadial. This lost world did more than fill museum cases. It rewrote the map of northern ecosystems, showing that life once thrived far north of any known refugium. It became a stark warning: those species vanished when the glaciers returned, offering a chilling parallel to our warming world. High in Wyoming's Beartooth Mountains, a summer heat wave thawed a tiny ice patch at 3,100 meters, and out tumbled the stumps of ancient whitebark pines. Standing upright in glacial mounds, these trees grew more than 5,500 years ago, when summers were warmer and forests crept higher than today's limits. Needles and cones, sealed in clear ice, offered dendrochronologists a mid-Holocene snapshot of temperature, precipitation, and fire cycles in this alpine realm. The discovery underscored how mountain ice can preserve entire ecosystems and how climate swings can shift tree lines by kilometers. On South Africa's Table Mountain, botanists once climbed craggy ledges only to stumble upon plants found nowhere else. Protea rupalea in full bloom, the spiky leaves of Erica pattersoni clinging to near vertical cliffs. They realized the Summit Plateau 500-million-year-old sandstone was a Gondwanan relic, a sky island harboring fynbos species that outlived ice ages and savanna invasions. DNA autolysis showed that many of these plants diverged from their closest relatives millions of years ago, marking Table Mountain as a crucible of evolution rather than a mere tourist vista. Down in the European Alps, ice core drillers captured more than water and dust. In the permafrost of a 3,000-meter cave, they found beetle wings and pollen grains from a time when glaciers lay not meters above, but kilometers farther downvalley. Layers of silt and organic debris preserved the record of plant succession forest, meadow, and open tundra throughout the last glacial maximum. These substrata became a benchmark for correlating climate events across Europe, allowing scientists to link alpine data with ice cores from Greenland and sediment cores from the Mediterranean. Perched atop the Tibetan Plateau, deep freeze sediment traps in high-altitude lakes unveiled tree pollen and river sediment signatures of a greener past. Cores from Lake Nam Kho revealed expanses of willow sedge meadows flourishing at elevations that now support only sparse alpine steppe. It meant that human migrations across the plateau, once thought to date only back a few thousand years, likely began in warmer, more hospitable interstadials. Archaeologists used those pollen profiles to reinterpret stone tool finds, placing early human footprints on the roof of the world as far back as 20,000 years ago. The Sierra Nevada's Lake Tahoe offers another layer of history. Divers extracted varved sediments, annual layers of clay, and silt that encode decades of fire, frequency driven by Native American burning regimes and natural lightning storms. When radiocarbon dating aligned charcoal layers with Paiute oral histories of controlled burns, it validated indigenous land management practices once dismissed by settler ecologists. Today, Tahoe varves guide modern forest restoration efforts, integrating traditional fire use knowledge with fire risk modeling. The Andean highlands yielded a surprise in the form of isolated glacial tarns above 4,000 meters, each trapping tiny fish found nowhere else. These Andean killifish, adapted to oxygen-poor, cold waters, cluster in a handful of high-altitude lakes. Genetic studies on museum specimens revealed that some lineages diverged from Amazonian fish tens of thousands of years ago, when glacial runoff carved temporary streams between plateau lakes and the lowland river systems. Those fish became living markers of Pleistocene hydrology and helped reconstruct Andean ice retreat timelines. Volcanic plateaus harbor frozen archives too. On Mauna Loa, Hawaii, lava tubes above 3,000 meters contain liverworts and springtails isolated since eruptions 1,000 years ago. When biologists sampled these communities, they discovered species with DNA unchanged for centuries. bottlenecked in narrow subterranean habitats. These cold-tolerant organisms inform our understanding of how life can survive extreme environments and offer clues to the limits of habitability on other volcanic worlds. Mount Fuji's summit features high-altitude peat bogs that preserve pollen grains from ancient forests. Cores from these bogs date back 8,000 years, chronicling the transition from pine oak woodland to subalpine scrub, and perhaps marking the dawn of rice agriculture in the lowlands below. As ash layers from historic eruptions punctuate pollen sequences, geologists correlate volcanic activity with human migration patterns, linking Fuji's eruptions to shifts in Jomon period settlements. In the American Southwest, lava beds on the Arizona-New Mexico border hold rock varnish-thin, manganese-rich coatings on basalt boulders that trap dust from distant deserts. By measuring varnish thickness and dating underlying desert varnish layers, geologists reconstructed aridity cycles of the past 20,000 years. These varnish records tie directly into sediment cores from Lake Mead, establishing a unified picture of southwestern climatic history. Even the Himalayas' hidden valleys have rewritten our understanding of ice ages. Sherpa-led expeditions into uncharted glacial caves in Khumbu unearthed wooden artifacts, prayer flags, and yak bones sealed by ice centuries ago. Radiocarbon dating placed them in the late Holocene, suggesting that sacred pilgrimage routes once extended far beyond currently traversable passes. Those high-altitude refugia became targets for glaciologists, mapping glacial advance and retreat phases, refining models of monsoon-driven snowfall. On Africa's MT, Kilimanjaro, satellite-guided climbs to the summit plateau revealed subfossil sand-buried roots still anchored in ancient soils. Those roots belonged to podocarpus trees that thrived during past wet periods, palms that wore high-altitude coats of cloud forest. Dating those roots showed that Kilimanjaro's lower slopes once supported evergreen forests as low as 4,000 meters. The data reframed our view of tropical glaciers. They were not just ice caps, but dynamic mirrors of past rainforest limits. The Cascades Mount Rainier hides its own time capsule in volcanic mudflows. In the broad lahars of the Carbon River Valley, geologists found buried stumps radiocarbon dated to 2,500 years ago. Those stumps, standing in ancient organic soil beneath boulders, showed that major eruptions reshaped valleys entirely, resetting ecosystems in a single night. That insight lives on in modern lahar warning systems, guiding hazard mapping for million-dollar communities beneath Rainier's shadow. In New Zealand, hidden glaciers on the slopes of NT Cook preserve icate crystals, an unstable mineral that forms only below 8 degrees Celsius. Icate's presence indicates past winter temperatures and subglacial water chemistry. As those glaciers recede, they release icate-bearing meltwater that leaves faint milky plumes in turquoise lakes. Chemists use those plumes to model cryogenic processes on icy moons like Europa, linking mountaintop chemistry to outer planet astrobiology. The European Dolomites hide yet another relic in rock shelters. Archaeologists discovered Bronze Age tools and cave paintings in alcoves that only seasonal meltwater channels expose. Dating those artifacts shifted timelines for transalpine trade networks by centuries, showing that early traders could cross high passes during brief late summer windows. Thus, high mountain archaeology redefined prehistoric migration and cultural exchange across Europe. Each of these moments, Antarctica's under-ice mountain discovery, Norway's Ice Age cave finds, exposed subfossil forests, sky island floras, alpine lake cores, and volcanic tube microfauna, did more than fill academic journals. They reshaped entire disciplines. Glaciology embraced hidden topography. Paleoecology used caves as time capsules. Evolutionary biology celebrated sky island endemism. And climate science integrated mountain records into global models. Mountains, once seen as barriers to humanity, revealed themselves as living library storerooms, where time is recorded in stone, ice, sediment, and living DNA. These discoveries remind us that the next paradigm shift may lie in a cavern no one has entered, a plateau no drone has flown above, or an ice patch no one thought mattered. Even now, the thawing of hidden mountain worlds threatens to erase invaluable records reminders that our highest frontiers are in a race against time. Yet the revelations we've already unearthed prove that whenever we peel back a glacier, pry open a cave, or climb above the clouds, the mountains guard stories older than civilization itself, stories that continue to change what we know about life history and our fragile place on this planet. Why do humans still dare to step where no bootprint yet lies, driven by the promise of secrets whispered on wind-scoured ridges? The answer lies not in a single impulse, but in a chorus of forces: our longing for mystery, our thirst for knowledge, and an ancient spark of wonder that ignites wherever earth and sky meet. Mountains, with their unmapped valleys, storm-lashed flanks, and hidden caves, beckon explorers not merely as obstacles to overcome, but as blank pages upon which to write new chapters of human story. From the first footfall beyond the tree line to the latest drone sweep of uncharted slopes, each venture into the unknown revives a primal chord within us. Before we had compasses or star charts, our ancestors looked upon fog-shrouded peaks as the realm of spirits, places where the world beyond could be glimpsed only in dreams. We inherit that same urge today, a hunger to stand on ridges no one has named, to peer down valleys that resonate only with the promise of first discovery. In doing so, we test our limits, both of body and imagination, and discover what it means to be alive. Legendary mountain expeditions have always stirred the human spirit. When Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay first stood atop Everest in 1953, they did more than set a record. They broadened the horizon of possibility, rewriting what we believed our species could achieve. A decade later, Reinhold Messner's solo ascent of the same peak without supplemental oxygen broke new ground, not only in endurance, but in the solitary conversation between human and mountain. Each of these milestones became a beacon, illuminating hidden corridors of courage and drawing new generations to remote base camps and unmapped couloirs. But it isn't only summits that lure us. The uncharted ridges and shadowed clefts of the Alps gave rise to the Tatzelworm, legend's serpentine spirits said to haunt caverns deep beneath Europe as most forbidding walls. In the Andes, explorers told tales of golden cities perched on hidden plateaus, fanned by mist so dense that entire ecosystems slipped from view. These myths didn't simply entertain. They propelled expeditions, funding even early aerial surveys. The promise of a single glimpse of a creature unseen, a plant unknown, or a valley forgotten by time was enough to send surveyors into monsoon-soaked forests and up ice-swept couloirs. Science, too, thrives on these margins. In the wind-whipped heights of the Rockies, ice patch archaeology revealed white-bark pine stumps buried for millennia, offering snapshots of mid-Holocene climates and fire regimes that reshape our models of alpine ecology. Bertooth Discovery, 2024. On Table Mountain, botanists mapping granite domes cataloged fynbos species that trace lineages back to Gondwana, reshaping theories of plant migration and island biogeography. Each time explorers pierce a new mist bank, they find evidence that life endures where we least expect it, preserving genetic blueprints older than many human civilizations. Yet the lure of mystery is as much emotional as it is intellectual. Mountains confer perspective. One step beyond the known world can transform anxiety about daily cares into awe at being part of something vast and indifferent. The roar of a crevasse opening beneath cramp and crunch, the hush of a high-altitude dawn, the sudden hush of a valley when helictites drip in a G-meter cave. These moments ETCH themselves into the explorer's soul. They reaffirm our smallness, and at the same time, our capacity for wonder. Community and camaraderie also draw us. The base camp fire, where tales of near misses and sights unseen bind strangers into lifelong friends, creates a social tapestry embroidered with elements of risk and heroism. Each expedition alchemizes disparate talents: geologists, climatologists, wilderness medics, mountaineers, into a living fellowship that defies the isolation of modern life. The bonds forged under storm-beaten tents often outlast any summit photo, becoming legends in their own right within climbing circles. Technological advances perpetually redraw the frontier, yet never fully close it. Satellites now map every peak. Drones fly beneath cloud cover yet in fog-belted ranges like the Southern Alps or in monsoon-choked valleys of Southeast Asia. Whole ecosystems remain underexplored. The roar of cascading waterfalls, the hush of gecko-filled caves, the glimmer of new insect species on misted leaves, these cannot be captured by LiDAR alone. They require the patience of human eyes, feet, and hearts. Psychologically, the unknown functions as a mirror. Explorers confront the mountain's dangers: avalanches, storms, altitudinal hypoxia, not merely to overcome them, but to understand fear, to refine judgment, and to test the limits of what the human body and psyche can endure. This self-knowledge, gleaned from confronting a storm-lashed ridge or a midnight crevasse rescue, becomes invaluable in every walk of life, inspiring leadership under pressure, resilience in crisis, and empathy for others facing unseen trials. Moreover, the human urge for meaning finds especially fertile ground in mountain mystery. When a surveyor deciphers a previously unmapped glacier flow, or a biologist identifies a plant clan so isolated it diverged millions of years ago, those breakthroughs carry existential weight. They speak of hidden chapters in Earth's story and our own. They place our everyday struggles and triumphs in a larger context, a narrative stretching back to the planet's fiery formation and forward to futures no one has yet imagined. Even the pursuit of glory cannot extinguish the call of the unknown. Records tumble as new routes entice elite alpinists, yet the sense of wonder remains undiminished. Each new first brings fresh questions. What if that ridge held a cave system untouched by humans? What if the digital mapping of a couloir missed entire plant communities clinging to mossy ledges? What if voices we hear in empty valleys echo stories or languages lost to time? These questions stoke the urge to go back out, to climb beyond the cairns of past expeditions, and track footprints that lead nowhere on any map. In an age of virtual reality and global connectivity, mountains stand as bulwarks of mystery. They host microcosms impervious to satellite beams, preserve ice archives of climate before telescopes were built, and nurture life forms that flit in the dawn light of crevices unreachable by drone. To explore them is to claim a stake in Earth's unfolding narrative, a reminder that, however much we learn, some stories remain unwritten, hidden in fog-swept summits and shadowed ravines, awaiting a fresh pair of eyes. Ultimately, the human spirit pushes into the unknown because mystery itself is fuel. It is the spark that transforms a walk in the woods into a pilgrimage, a drone flight into a treasure hunt, and a scientific expedition into a quest for meaning. Mountains offer the promise of discovery, not only of new landscapes, but of new, self-knowledge forged in thin air, sculpted by storms and polished by the hush that falls when we stand on a ridge and peer into worlds no one has yet named. And as long as there lie unseen passages, whispered legends, and unmapped, elevation's explorers will continue to heed that ancient call, to chase horizons not yet reached, to listen for secrets waiting beneath stone, and to carry the human spirit into the very heart of mystery. The wind breathes through high passes in a consonant whisper, at once a greeting and a warning to those who dare to listen. Above tree line, mountains suspend their ridges between earth and sky, their summits wrapped in perpetual cloud and swirling snow. In these heights, the world holds its breath, drawing a line between the known and the unknowable. Chart after chart may trace every contour of granite and basalt, but beyond each surveyed ridge lie hidden valleys, secret glaciers, and walls of stone that no map can fully capture. This is the eternal silence of unexplored worlds, where mystery is not an absence of information, but a presence, alive and waiting. For centuries, human curiosity has driven us uphill and onward, chasing the promise of new horizons. Yet every time we set foot on a fresh ridge, we encounter the same truth. Mountains refuse to yield all their stories. Clouds and fog swirl into side gorges, erasing trails the moment our backs are turned. Thermals and katabatic winds reshape snowdrifts overnight, rendering yesterday's tracks obsolete. Even digital elevation models, constructed from satellite data or airborne, LIDA can not register the microtopography hidden in crevices or the fractures that cradle life as small as survivors. In the whisper of an alpine breeze, the mountains assert a timeless challenge. You may know my shape, but you will never know my soul. Those who push into these silent realms quickly learn that mystery is as much a comfort as a barrier. In the hush of a high plain, where only the creak of crampons and the sigh of retreating snow can be heard, explorers feel a clarity that evades them at lower altitudes. The clutter of daily life falls away. The buzzing of phones, the glare of electric lights, the endless churn of information. Up here, thought has room to unfurl, to drift along the wind-chiseled ridges of imagination. Paradoxically, the silence of the unknown becomes the most articulate medium for reflection, an open canvas, upon which we project our deepest questions. Consider the remote valleys of the Karakoram, where satellite imagery shows only streaks of gray and white. Beneath those lenses lie icefalls that tumble in suspended disbelief, walls of sérac so vast they swallow climbers in moments. The explorers who dared to descend into these crevassed arenas found microclimates no one predicted. Pockets of green moss clinging to south-facing cobbles, yaks grazing on wind-carved snowfields, and high-altitude streams teeming with fish that have evolved without competition for thousands of years. Those biologists, working without a script, cataloged new species of springtail and discovered algae that glows faintly under UV light, organisms previously unknown to science, preserved by the mountain's own indifference to human schedules. Farther east, the Tibetan Plateau stretches like a sea of stone and wind, a high desert of stark yet dazzling beauty. On its western edge, a team of glaciologists drilled ice cores only to find volcanic ash layers from eruptions that predate recorded history. Each ash band corresponded to a cataclysm in the lowlands' culture shifts, migrations, dynastic collapses, events cached in ice and waiting for the right tools to unearth them. These discoveries reframed Asian climate history, revealing links between distant mountain flanks and the rise and fall of civilizations. Yet much of the plateau remains a vast white swirl on any atlas, its depth seldom visited, as if the world's roof itself keeps its upper stories locked. Even in ranges long crisscrossed by trade routes, unexplored corners persist. The Alps, Europe's most studied mountains, harbor caves veiled by snowfields and avalanche slopes. In one such cavern near Mont Blanc, divers mapping an underwater labyrinth found chambers filled with stalactites untouched since their last Ice Age burial. They recovered pollen from Pleistocene flora, enabling botanists to reconstruct valley ecosystems from long before humans ever carved a path through the Col du Gent. That drop into the unknown underscored a simple truth. Even beneath the most familiar peaks, there are vaults so well sealed that only plummeting into darkness can reveal their secrets. Weather, more than any map or satellite, dictates where knowledge ends and mystery begins. Monsoon swells pummel the Himalaya in summer, cloaking valleys in rain so dense that rivers vanish under curtain-like sheets of water. Without dry season windows, even drones retreat to base camp, their batteries drained and their propellers warped by moisture. In the Andes, Afternoon thunderstorms rise as quickly as they fade, turning well-marked trails into rivers in minutes. Explorers stranded on ridges speak of mirages, not the shimmering illusions of heat, but the false promise of visibility beyond the ridge crest. Storms can erect their own kingdoms, networks of clouds that rule over rock with sovereign force. Beyond storms, the ground itself betrays us. Landslides and avalanches can occur with geological timing, not monthly or even yearly, but in pulses connected to glacial retreat or seismic shifts. A team mapping rockfall scars near Patagonia Cerro Torre found an event sequence unraveling over decades slow creep, sudden slip, seasonal bulges, before a final collapse erased the prospect of safe passage. Those slopes now remain unexplored, the once charted route erased, as though the mountain had rewritten its own history. In that way, the terrain itself writes footnotes to every map, reminding us that no chart can outpace the mountain's will to change. Caves add another dimension of secrecy. Karst systems high above sea level form. When limestone ridges freeze and thaw, cracks widen, and acidified water carves underground rivers. In Slovenia's Julian Alps, explorers traced one such river for 6 kilometers before hitting an impassable choke, a subterranean wall so tight that no one can pass. On the other side, the cave network reportedly opens into vast chambers, echoing with drips and the whispered suction of cave eel feeding. Yet no light has ever illuminated that space. Those darknesses linger as a reminder that the unknown can reside not only on mountaintops, but beneath our feet, in tunnels sculpted by eons of water and stone. Flora and fauna heighten the sense of mystery. On the Tepui plateaus of Venezuela, botanists count dozens of endemic orchids and carnivorous plants that never drift beyond cliff edges. Those tablelands, lost to the lowland forests for millions of years, host frogs so small they cross a rinsed leaf in a single leap, and spiders that spin webs of golden silk glinting in noonday haze. Attempts to survey the outer ledges have yielded glimpses through binoculars, but helicopters cannot land, and ropes rarely hold on the slippery sandstone. The plateau's biota remains half a dream to science known, described, yet physically untouchable. Remote valleys foster isolated ecosystems as well. In Georgia's Caucasus, a secret basin known only to local shepherds' shelters, alpine meadows blanketed by primulas and gentians in early summer, drawing marmots and golden eagles in truce. Satellite images hint at a green patch amid sloped gray, but cartographers omitted it for decades because cloud banks hugged the cirque year-round. Only when a young researcher rented a helicopter for a few hours did the world learn that this verdant cradle exists, and with it a host of plant species not found on the surrounding ridges. Within that green bowl lies a piece of botanical heritage preserved by altitude and obscurity. Even when we glimpse these wonders, they return to silence almost instantly. Helicopter blades roar overhead, then fade into a low hum as the chopper departs, leaving behind only the rustle of wind and the secret lives of flowers and insects. Explorers who dropped in to photograph the basin returned with herbarium samples and high-definition footage. Yet the meadows remain as they were, untouched, unmapped by conventional trails, and inscrutable to all but the few who dared to ascend the cloud-shrouded approach. Mystery in mountain worlds is sustained by more than fog and rock. It's woven into human culture. Indigenous oral traditions often encode knowledge of hidden springs, wildlife corridors, and summits as spiritual zones. In many regions, outsiders are discouraged, openly or subtly, from venturing into sacred passes that vanish into the clouds. Those unspoken agreements preserve more than reverence. They maintain pockets of wilderness where ecosystems develop on their own cadence, unswayed by guidebooks or GPS tracks. In these sanctified spaces, ignorance is a form of respect, a recognition that some thresholds should not be crossed. This interplay between human yearning and restraint shapes our understanding of unexplored worlds. We push to the edge of known maps, to ridges where our last waymarkers fade, and there we hesitate awed by both the vista and the void. The temperature drops, the wind roars, the ground feels unconsolidated. We realize that the mountain offers no guarantee of return or revelation. It keeps its own pace, its own calendar, and its own secrets. Yet the allure never fails. Each unexplored couloir, each blind valley, offers the possibility of discovering new forms of life, untold geologic structures, forgotten climates encoded in frozen cores. For every ridge climbed, there is another further east or higher, reshaped year by snow and storm. The unknown retreats only to re-emerge. When a new drone technology solves one mystery, it reveals another layer of complexity beneath. When satellites peer through haze, they flicker in the face of cyclone-born clouds that refuse to yield. In every season and region, the mountains keep at least one curtain undrawn. The eternal silence of these unexplored worlds is an invitation. It asks us to listen more than to see, to approach with humility rather than hubris. It asks us to collaborate with local knowledge holders, with multidisciplinary teams, and with the mountain's own rhythms, to coax what secrets it might share without igniting its fury. It demands patience, for ice and stone guard their archives in millennia-long time scales. And it imparts a promise that whenever we think we have measured every height, we will discover a new depth in which our knowledge is merely a whisper against history's roar. Mountains will continue to keep their secrets, not out of spite, but because in mystery lies the beauty of the wild. They stand as living monuments to the fact that, in an age of satellite eyes and massive datasets, some chapters of Earth's story remain unwritten. The ridges that vanish into cloud, the glaciers that carve new paths, and the caves that swallow light are all testaments to the sublime truth. The world is more vast and more complex than any human ambition can span. And so the eternal silence endures a silent promise that mystery, preserved in ice and stone, will always outlast our most determined quests for certainty. Conclusion. Across 15 chapters, we have journeyed from sunlit meadows to ghostly ridges, from hidden glaciers to ancient caves. We have tracked avalanches, marveled at time capsules preserved in ice, and listened to whispered legends born in mist and shadow. Along the way, we glimpsed how mountains harbor ecosystems untouched by maps and satellites, how indigenous wisdom and modern exploration intersect, and how the unknown remains as vast as the peaks themselves. Through isolated plateaus, we met plants and animals found nowhere else, living relics of epochs before recorded time. We ventured into impossible cliffs and carved paths by roaring rivers, each landscape a testament to resilience and hidden complexity. Technology extended our sight via satellites, drones, and mapping, yet weather and terrain conspired to reclaim their mysteries. In every remote valley and shadowed canyon, the earth holds stories that no digital lens can fully capture. The human spirit thrives on these silent challenges. We seek both discovery and self-driven by curiosity, as ancient as our first ancestors who glimpsed mountain summits and imagined gods living in the mist. Each new waypoint extends the boundary of what we know and redefines the edge of wonder. Whether through a daring ascent, a subterranean descent, or the recording of a single new species, the explorer's journey is as much inward as it is upward. At the end of our voyage, we see that mountains keep their secrets not to frustrate us, but to remind us that mystery is a gift. It inspires respect for the world's vastness and teaches that even in an age of satellites, some wonders lie beyond the speed of light and the reach of circuits. In the eternal silence of unexplored summits, there endures the promise of discovery, calling each generation to stand on the cusp of the unknown.